Chapter 1. The More You Know. Edward held his wand, staring in bewilderment at the sprawling garden that had suddenly appeared before him, his mind reeling in shock. The last time he had been this stunned was 3 years ago when he inexplicably transmigrated into the world of Harry Potter and became a first-year student at Hogwarts. As someone who had boarded the train of transmigration, Edward's luck was a mix of good and bad. The bad part. He didn't get the ever-popular cheat system. The good part. This body's innate talent was quite remarkable. By his third year, he had already mastered most spells with ease. However, there was one thing that constantly nagged at him. He was already 16 years old. Compared to the usual Hogwarts students who entered at 11, Edward had enrolled at the age of 14. Sometimes, he wondered, was this so-called remarkable talent merely the natural advantage of being 3 years older? As for why he had only started at 14, he had no idea. He retained no memories from before his transmigration. He had even borrowed Dumbledore's pensieve in an attempt to recover them, but unfortunately, he could only view memories from after he arrived in this world. Edward shook his head, pushing these thoughts aside as he focused on reality. Just now, I did the same thing I always do. I pushed open the door to the room of requirement and walked in. The room of requirement can transform into various spaces depending on one's needs, but it should still be a room. So why am I in a massive garden? A thought struck him. Could it be that someone secretly swapped the room of requirement's door with a portkey? At this realization, Edward immediately waved his wand, casting a disillusionment charm and a protega to ensure his safety. Keeping his guard up, he swiftly scanned his surroundings. Before him stretched a grand and luxurious garden. Vibrant flowers swayed gently in the sunlight, carried by the breeze. The trees stood in neat rows, and ivy-covered walls were meticulously trimmed. Evidently, this place was well maintained. In a shaded corner of the garden, a small hanging chair sat idly, with a blue lace hat casually placed atop it. Perhaps its owner had left it there by accident. Not far away stood a magnificent European-style mansion, almost resembling a miniature castle, a clear testament to the wealth of its owner. Edward frowned slightly. Is this the Malfoy Manor, or the estate of some other pureblood family? Achoo. The air here is awful. Cautiously, he approached the mansion. Just as he was about 10 meters away from the entrance, a young girl dressed in a maid's uniform hurried past him. Without hesitation, he followed her. The maid entered the lavishly decorated mansion and stopped in front of a bedroom door, knocking gently. Miss, the ball is about to begin. It's time to change into your gown. Silence. The maid sighed. I'll have them bring the dress over first. She turned to leave, but before she could take a step, Edward materialized out of thin air, his wand flashing as he cast, Petrificus Totalis. The maid's body froze instantly, her wide, terrified eyes locked in place. Edward strode forward, locking eyes with the petrified maid. Legilimens. Woof. A massive golden fur dog lunged out from the shadows. Edward instinctively flicked his wand. Stupefy. The golden dog yelped as it was sent flying. At the same time, an overwhelming surge of memories flooded Edward's mind. The maid's memories were simple: caring for the young lady, instructing other maids, eating, sleeping, and caring for the young lady again. Nothing useful. Just as that thought formed, a series of familiar yet unfamiliar images surfaced in his mind. A crimson moon. The Church of the Evernight. Audrey Hall. Backland. Earl Hall. Edward's face turned deathly pale. Audrey, Backland, the crimson moon. Wait. This is the world of Lord of the Mysteries. The weaker you are, the more dangerous knowledge becomes. The more you know, the faster you die. And he had read the entirety of Lord of the Mysteries. Wait. If this was Lord of the Mysteries, then the maid should have been speaking in Lonis. Why could he understand her? Suddenly, searing pain flared across the back of his hand, and faint, indistinct lines appeared on his skin. Almost simultaneously, a wave of coolness surged from the top of his head, washing away his suffocating sense of crisis. Edward froze in place, momentarily stunned. But there was no time to ponder. He abruptly raised his wand, aimed it at himself, and gritted his teeth. Obliviate. Boom. Edward was sent flying backwards, crashing onto the floor 2 meters away. A few moments later, he sat up, clutching his throbbing forehead, his face contorted in pain. Can someone please tell me why Obliviate just sent me flying 2 meters? Groaning, he reached for his wand, which had fallen nearby, and staggered to his feet. This is insane. I actually cast Obliviate on myself. Good thing memory charms allow for targeted erasure. I only forgot. Edward froze for a moment. What exactly did I forget? The more you know, the faster you die. That thought surfaced instantly. So I must have erased all the memories I wasn't supposed to have. This is the world of Lord of the Mysteries. This is Backland. And this is the mansion of Miss Justice, and this golden retriever lying on the ground. Edward turned his gaze back to the unconscious golden retriever, only to catch it stealthily crawling forward, hugging the ground as if trying to make itself invisible. It was an absolute masterclass in pretending not to exist. The moment it noticed Edward looking, the retriever immediately flopped back down with an exaggerated thud, playing dead again. Susie. I am just a dog. How could I possibly have any ill intentions? Edward stared blankly. This is supposed to be the future dream hound. Why did it wake up so fast? Stupefy. With a pitiful yelp, Susie collapsed once more. Edward stepped forward and gave her head a few absent-minded pats, muttering under his breath, "Tisk, this fur is as smooth as silk, she must be fed really well." He glanced toward the door the maid had knocked on earlier. It had to be the bedroom of Audrey Hall, Miss Justice herself. Considering the commotion from Susie's sudden attack, plus his own dramatic crash landing, the noise had been anything but small. And yet, Miss Justice hadn't reacted at all. Is she attending a tarot club meeting? Either way, I need to get out of here. If I remember correctly, the Hall family has beyonders. The disillusionment charm can fool ordinary people, but if someone with spirit vision is around, that's another story. First, he had to make sure he was safe. Then, he could think about returning to the Harry Potter world. With 2 quick transfiguration spells, the petrified maid and the unconscious Susie were transformed into a chair and a flower pot. After reinforcing his disillusionment charm, Edward turned and headed toward the exit. Just as he neared the doorway, 2 maids rushed over, glancing around suspiciously. The noise just now came from here, right? But there's nothing here. Wasn't Anne supposed to be calling for Miss? Where is she? No idea. Huh. Why is there an extra chair over there? Did Anne leave it behind? As they whispered and approached, Edward pressed himself against the wall, carefully avoiding their line of sight. Then, Emily, am I seeing things? That flower pot, did it just get bigger? The flower pot, it has fur. Susie. That's Susie. Somebody help. Susie turned into a flower pot. No. Wait. The flower pot turned into Susie. The 2 maids paled and started screaming. Edward abandoned all thoughts of moving stealthily. He turned and bolted. I knew it. I should have shamelessly begged for apparition lessons back then. At Hogwarts, apparition was considered advanced magic, only taught to 6th-year students who were at least 17. The risk of splinching was one thing, but the main issue was that apparition was forbidden within the school grounds. Formal training could only begin in the Great Hall when the Ministry of Magic temporarily lifted the restriction, followed by additional lessons in Hogsmeade. Edward, a high-achieving and knowledge-hungry student, was well-liked by most professors and had an especially good relationship with Headmaster Dumbledore. After all, it was Dumbledore himself who had personally brought him from the orphanage to Hogwarts. Over the past 3 years, through various unofficial audits of upper-year classes, Edward had managed to learn many spells far beyond the typical 3rd-year curriculum. Woof! A sudden gust of wind roared from behind him. Susie had regained consciousness and was lunging at him again. Edward had no time to cast another spell. He could only throw himself backwards in an attempt to evade. Thud! Susie hit the floor, but with a forceful kick of her hind legs, she slid forward at high speed and chomped down on Edward's pant leg. Her front paws crossed over each other in a firm, unbreakable lock, clamping down on one of his legs. Edward's heart sank in both shock and anger. Beyonders dogs really can see through disillusionment charms. And their resistance to magic is absurdly strong. Without hesitation, he threw out 7 or 8 stunning spells in quick succession. His disillusionment charm flickered and broke, revealing his figure once again. The 2 maids screamed at the top of their lungs. Intruder! Help! Someone help! Their frantic cries echoed through the entire mansion. A flurry of hurried footsteps approached from all directions. Edward gritted his teeth. That damn dog just had to play dirty. Cursing under his breath, he hit Susie with a relatio spell, forcefully loosening her grip. Without waiting for her to let go completely, he dragged her along as he dashed toward the exit. Behind him, the maids' voices were shrill with panic. Help! Miss Audrey's dog has been kidnapped. 14 comments 0 vote. Chapter 2. Take off your clothes. Edward barely managed to pull his leg free before a large crowd swarmed in. Leading them was the aging Earl Hall, whose figure and complexion had begun to show the wear of time. His sharp blue eyes were filled with wariness. Who are you? Edward ignored him completely and once again concealed himself with the disillusionment charm. Earl Hall's face darkened. He immediately turned to his eldest son, Hibbert Hall. Hibbert. Hibbert nodded in understanding, took a few steps back, and quickly disappeared into the crowd. Standing in the center of his servants and guards, Earl Hall's expression regained its calm. My friend, he said steadily, if you need something, just say it. I can promise that you'll be able to leave with it safely. Hidden from view, Edward found himself at a crossroads. He knew that Hibbert Hall had most likely gone to fetch a Beander. If he tried to flee under the cover of invisibility now, there was a high chance he would run straight into one of the Hall family's extraordinary individuals. It seemed like there was only one option left. Swiftly, he stepped toward Audrey's bedroom door and waved his wand. Alohomora. With a soft click, the locked door swung open. At the same time, Edward's figure became visible once more. Without giving Earl Hall a chance to react, he shoved the door open, slipped inside, and slammed it shut behind him. The room before him was lavishly decorated, ornate wallpaper, an opulent bed, an exquisite vanity, elegant furniture, and priceless oil paintings adorning the walls. Frankly speaking, it didn't look like the bedroom of a 17-year-old girl at all. Just then, with a soft creak, the bathroom door opened. A girl in a flowing gown stepped out. Her golden hair, smooth as silk, cascaded over her shoulders. Her emerald green eyes were as clear as crystal, deep as the ocean yet as pure as the finest gemstone. Her aura was both innocent and noble. Edward had to admit, this was the most beautiful girl he had seen in both of his lives. Audrey had just finished completing the summoning ritual tasked by the fool. Hearing the commotion outside, she hurriedly packed everything away before stepping out of the washroom. And then, she saw him. A boy in a strange black robe, unlike anything common in Lowen's fashion. He seemed to be around her age but taller, about a head taller than her, around 1.8 meters. His short, ash-blonde hair gave him a neat and lively appearance. His features were rather handsome, though far from the level of a royal prince. His expression was tense, and his fingers gripped the peculiar stick in his hand tightly, as if it were something extremely important to him. The right leg of his pants was crumpled in a large patch, with a few small holes dotting the fabric. From the noises outside, it was clear he was a Beander. Yet, based on his actions so far, he didn't seem like a common burglar. Before she could speak, the boy took the initiative. Miss Audrey, I mean no offense, Edward said instinctively, in surprisingly fluent lowness. So, I can not only understand but also speak the language perfectly. This had to be some sort of hidden perk granted by transmigrating into the Lord of the Mysteries world. Did this mean he could also understand languages infused with mystical power, like Jotun or Hermes? Snapping back to reality, Edward quickly continued, I accidentally stumbled into your family's mansion and had a bit of a misunderstanding with your relatives. I only entered your room to protect myself. A flicker of fear crossed Audrey's gaze, only to be quickly replaced by curiosity. You're a Beander, aren't you? Wait. Edward raised a hand to stop her from speaking further before waving his wand. Muffaliato. A gentle hum filled the air as the muffling charm took effect. Only then did Edward respond, you could say that. But I'm not quite the same as your kind of Beander. Audrey immediately blurted out, how do you know I? Halfway through her sentence, she caught herself and clapped a hand over her mouth. But her shimmering emerald eyes still betrayed her surprise. In a different time and place, Edward might have found it amusing to tease her. Before advancing to sequence 4, Audrey had always been an innocent and curious young girl. It was only after experiencing war, death, and countless hardships that she truly grew up, becoming a qualified Beander, a true spectator. But right now, Edward had no time to dwell on such thoughts. He had chosen to barge into Audrey's room as a desperate gamble, but who knew what kind of Beander would arrive in a moment. Even if he took her hostage, he might unknowingly be dragged into a dream and eliminated without ever realizing it. Left standing awkwardly to the side, Audrey hesitated for a moment before speaking again. Mr. Home Intruder. I'm not a home intruder. Edward rubbed his forehead and interrupted her. Do you have any idea how calling someone that could provoke their anger? Then, Mr. Accidentally intruding Beander, I can actually persuade my father to let you leave safely. You believe me that easily? Before he could even finish his sentence, realization dawned on him. Right. At this point, Audrey had already taken her potion and advanced to sequence 9, spectator. For her, judging whether someone was lying based on their words and body language was second nature. No wonder they always say to be careful around spectators. It's nearly impossible to lie in front of one. Edward believed that Audrey was sincere. But Earl Hall. There was no way he would allow an unknown Beander who had barged into his home to walk away so easily. Since that's the case, Edward took 2 steps toward Audrey before abruptly stopping and extending his hand. Can you give me a strand of your hair? Audrey hesitated. She trusted her previous observations, but in the mystical world, hair carried significant meaning. However, she quickly slumped her shoulders in resignation. She didn't seem to have much of a choice. Carefully, she twirled a golden strand of hair around her index finger and gently plucked it out. Accio hair. With a soft whoosh, the golden strand flew into Edward's hand. He immediately reached into the small leather pouch at his waist. Yes, this unassuming pouch had been enchanted with an undetectable extension charm, containing over 20 cubic meters of space. Audrey watched his actions with curiosity. Although she had already become a Beander after consuming her potion, low-sequence spectators didn't possess any directly visible abilities. Seeing someone summon an object with just a word genuinely made her envious. Edward stuffed the golden hair into his flask, gave it a gentle shake, and then looked up at Audrey. All right, take off your clothes. Quote question mark question mark question mark quote. Audrey's emerald eyes widened instantly. What happened to accidental intrusion? What happened to no offense intended? What happened to not being a bad guy? The truth was, Edward was quite skilled at transfiguration and had already mastered the switching spell. However, he didn't know how long he would need to maintain his disguise, and transfiguration had a time limit. Seeing Audrey instinctively retreat in alarm, Edward frowned. What are you imagining? I just need to borrow your outfit. Go change in the bathroom and hand it over. Quote question mark question mark question mark quote. Audrey was momentarily stunned. Although the timing felt completely off, she couldn't help but puff out her cheeks in mild indignation. With a huff, she grabbed another dress from her wardrobe and walked into the bathroom, slamming the door shut. But the moment she did, she realized something. Audrey. You're being held hostage. Even if he's not a bad guy, this is hardly the time to act like a spoiled noble lady. Outside, Edward listened to the rustling sounds of her changing but remained on high alert. In the original novel, Miss Justice was indeed kind, righteous, and naive, but this was the real world. And in the real world, human nature was the most unpredictable thing of all. Yawn. Suddenly, Edward felt his eyelids grow heavy. He let out an involuntary yawn. Strange, I went to bed early last night, so why am I? His heart lurched. Was a Sequence 7 nightmare trying to pull him into a dream? The only reason it hadn't succeeded immediately was probably thanks to his use of occlumency, which was interfering with the dream invasion. But how long could he resist? That was uncertain. Renervate. Edward hastily cast the reviving spell on himself, then rushed to the bathroom door and banged on it. Are you done yet? Hurry up. I'm done. Audrey swung the door open. She had changed into the blue gown she'd grabbed earlier, but her usually pristine golden hair was now a tousled mess, completely unlike the graceful young lady from moments ago. She handed the clothes to Edward. What do you need my dress for? To wear. Edward couldn't be bothered to explain. Right in front of her, he swiftly stripped off his Hogwarts robes, revealing the inner lining beneath. Then, without hesitation, he grabbed the still-warm dress and hurriedly put it on. In between movements, he took a sip of the polyjuice potion. This series of actions only piqued Audrey's curiosity further. After a moment of hesitation, she couldn't help but ask, are you planning to impersonate me? But you don't look anything like me. Even our body shapes are completely different. Before she could finish speaking, Edward's skin began to bubble and shift as if it were boiling. His short ash blonde hair rapidly lengthened, turning into silky golden locks. His brown eyes transformed into a bright emerald green. His frame seemed to shrink and compress until he was the exact same height as Audrey. He was the exact same person as Audrey. Audrey abandoned all pretense of ladylike composure. She rubbed her eyes hard, making sure she wasn't hallucinating. Even though she was well aware of the mystical world's wonders, witnessing someone turn into her was still deeply unsettling. Edward quickly removed the undergarments beneath his robes and adjusted the dress to fit better. Though the outfit still looked slightly messy, that only made the disguise more convincing. After all, a kidnapping victim's clothes should be disheveled. Then, he untied his leather pouch from his waist and loosened the rubber cord securing it. With a quick pull, the pouch expanded into an opening large enough for an adult to crawl into. Hurry up and get in. Audrey was quick-witted this time. Her emerald eyes gleamed with excitement. This bag has a large space inside, doesn't it? Is this one of your Beyonder abilities? She took a few steps closer and peered inside. A faint glow emanated from within, illuminating a small wooden ladder that led downward into an unknown space. Edward gave her a push. Get moving. If you like it so much, I'll make you one later. Immediately, she lifted the hem of her dress and climbed down the ladder. Even when her entire body had disappeared into the bag, she poked her head out one last time to say, it's a deal. You have to keep your word. Quote. Edward felt speechless. Miss Justice, aren't you taking this a little too lightly? He promptly shoved her inside. Sorry about this, Miss Justice. Then, Bombarda Maxima. A brilliant blue explosion smashed against the outer wall of the bedroom. Boom. A second later, a wave of searing heat and force erupted. The walls crumbled. The ceiling collapsed. A luxurious bedroom that an average low-end citizen couldn't afford in several lifetimes, reduced to ruins in an instant. Cough. Amid the billowing dust and debris, Edward hurriedly stuffed his wand into the pouch before strapping it tightly against his skin. Then, he collapsed onto the floor, feigning unconsciousness. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 9 comments 0 vote. Chapter 3. Welcome to Hogwarts. 2 figures rushed into the smoke-filled room, clad in the uniforms of the Church of the Evernight. Both wore red gloves. The Red Gloves were an elite team within the Evernight Church's Night Watchers. Generally, the minimum requirement to join was Sequence 7, making them elite members carefully selected by the Church. Earl Hall, a renowned banker in Lowen and a devout follower of the Evernight Church, had likely been caught off guard by the situation. As a result, the 2 red gloves sent by the Church were only at Sequence 7. The 2 quickly assessed the scene, and one of them spoke, the perpetrator has already escaped. But I was watching outside the entire time. I didn't see anyone leave. They must have fled during the explosion. Earl Hall was far from his usual composed self. I don't care about that damn criminal. I just want to know, how is my daughter? She's just unconscious. Earl Hall hurriedly picked up Audrey, Edward, and ran out while shouting, Hibbert, get the doctor here immediately. Meanwhile, the 2 red gloves remained behind, searching for traces of the intruder. A sudden gust of wind swept through the room, blowing away the lingering dust and smoke. From the sky descended an old man with silver hair and silver eyes, wearing a black robe embroidered with the symbols of the storm. His expression was grim. It was none other than the Spellsinger of God, a snake, a cardinal of the Church of the Lord of Storms, known for his catchphrase, I will arrive, but always late. His silver eyes quickly scanned the surroundings before another gust of wind lifted him, carrying him off in pursuit of the fleeing suspect. The 2 red gloves exchanged glances and sighed. Let's head back to the church. We'll leave the pursuit to Lord Spellsinger. In another room of Earl Hall's luxurious mansion, Edward lay quietly on a bed, surrounded by Earl Hall, Hibbert, and a few others. A doctor, wearing glasses and dressed in a neatly pressed uniform, stood up and reassured them, Your Lordship, Miss Audrey has only fainted from shock. She is otherwise unharmed. Before Earl Hall could respond, Hibbert Hall anxiously asked, Are you sure? That explosion was massive, or you saying she was only scared? I had the nurses check her thoroughly just now. Miss Audrey has no visible injuries. I am certain. Earl Hall exhaled a breath of relief. That's good. Then he turned to Hibbert. Any updates from the Evernight Church or the Church of the Storm? Not yet, but I'll push for more information. Earl Hall rarely showed anger, but now his face darkened. No matter who did this, I will not let them go unpunished. Just then, the sound of sobbing filled the room as the Countess entered, supported by a maid. Oh, my poor daughter. Earl Hall sighed in frustration. Didn't I tell you not to inform your mother yet? It was impossible to hide something this big. Besides, Audrey is fine. The Countess hurried to the bedside, reaching out to hold Edward's hand, but Earl Hall quickly intercepted her, guiding her out of the room. All right, Audrey is fine. What she needs now is rest. As the door gently closed behind them, the room was finally empty. Edward allowed himself a moment of relaxation. For now, he had passed this hurdle, but how was he supposed to get out of this mess? The Evernight Church likely had people watching the area, not to mention those ever-persistent mandated punishers who could take his life at any moment. If he stayed any longer, his disguise would surely be exposed. After all, he was a modern man, worse, a male, trying to impersonate a noble lady. Playing dead when things got awkward could only work for so long. Besides, he was running out of polyjuice potion. Edward sighed. He was running out of options when he suddenly sensed someone watching him. His heart skipped a beat, and he quickly turned toward the source of the gaze. In the shadows, the golden-furred Susie lay on the floor. Her expression displayed an eerily human-like mix of hesitation, worry, and fear. For a moment, the human and the dog locked eyes. In the end, it was Susie who spoke first. "You are not Audrey, are you?" Her ears drooped as she slowly stepped out of the shadows. "Where is she? Is she safe? Will you let her go?" Edward immediately sat up, his guard raised. He had no wand within reach. If this turned into a fight, he wasn't sure who would win. Susie took another step closer, lowering her head slightly and avoiding his gaze as she spoke again. Is she still alive? Edward had just begun to reply when suddenly, the entire world lost its color. The surroundings faded into a gray, featureless void. Time and space seemed to freeze in place. The next second, a powerful sense of falling overtook him. His vision blurred from the high-speed descent, and a piercing, maddening whisper filled his ears. It was like nails scratching against a blackboard, or thousands of silver needles stabbing into his fingertips and twisting violently. A searing pain erupted in his mind, as if something foreign was being forcibly crammed inside. It felt like his head was going to explode. His skin began to boil, turning a deep red, while his heartbeat slowed more and more. Nausea, dizziness, agony, torment. Just when all sensations reached their peak, they abruptly vanished, like an illusion. Edward collapsed to his knees, gasping for air as if he had been drowning. His surroundings slowly regained their colors, shifting from a gray void back to reality. A vast, dimly lit space filled with towering stacks of old bookshelves, scattered tables and chairs, and broken, outdated broomsticks. Everything about this place screamed one thing. The room of requirement. I'm back. After a brief moment of shock, an overwhelming sense of joy followed. Compared to the crazy, polluted, and perilous world of Lord of the Mysteries, he naturally preferred this one. Yes, Voldemort was lurking around like a persistent troublemaker, but overall, this world was much safer. More importantly, the magic he had mastered here gave him a much stronger sense of security. Unlike in Lord of the Mysteries, where even a stunning spell couldn't take down a dog. A searing pain flared on the back of his left hand. Still in the form of Audrey, his pale, fair hand now bore a faintly glowing, orangered square mark. The glow lasted for over 10 seconds before gradually fading, leaving behind a shallow, square-shaped tattoo, an outline resembling a door. Before he could think further, a surge of information flooded into his mind. This square mark was the key to his transmigration into the Lord of the Mysteries world. Now that it had been activated for the first time, a fixed pattern had been established. Every 15 days, he would be forcibly transported between the two worlds. 15 days in Lord of the Mysteries, 15 days in Harry Potter. However, while he was in Harry Potter, time would inexplicably stop in the other world. That meant when he returned to Lord of the Mysteries, he would reappear at the exact moment he had left. What a bizarre time setup. From a supernatural perspective, Lord of the Mysteries was undoubtedly a higher-tier world compared to Harry Potter. Yet for some reason, time in the former was the one being frozen, while the latter continued to progress. Shouldn't it be much harder to freeze a higher world? Then again, if Lord of the Mysteries was frozen in time, did that mean he didn't have to worry about certain entities, like the primordial one, following him into this world? Wait. Forced transmigration. Does that mean I'll never be able to escape that dangerous world? Edward glanced at the clock on the wall. 5 p.m. That meant that exactly 15 days from now, at 5 p.m., he would be sent back to Lord of the Mysteries. And the memories I erased, it's still too soon to restore them. Otherwise, every time I go back, I'll have to hit myself with a memory charm again. I don't want to end up like Bertha Jerkins, but facing the Lord of the Mysteries world with missing memories. Who knows what kind of fatal mistakes I'll make. No, I'll have to take some time to recover them and write down key survival notes, just in case. As he was thinking, his body suddenly started growing taller. The well-fitted dress he wore tightened, narrowing at the seams. With his increasing height and broader frame, the fabric strained before finally tearing apart. The polyjuice potion had worn off. The small leather pouch hidden against his body slipped off and landed on the floor. Wait, Audrey is inside the pouch. Did she come with me? Edward quickly grabbed the pouch and peered inside. His gaze immediately landed on a black book resting in someone's hands. On a nearby sofa, Audrey Hall sat asleep, her head tilted slightly to the side. She actually came with me. Edward blurted out in shock. Audrey was instantly woken up by his voice. She lifted her head, looked at him, and blinked in confusion. Huh, you've changed back. Can I come out now? Edward hesitated. Quote. I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first? Audrey resisted the urge to puff out her cheeks in frustration and instead pursed her lips. Mr. Beander, are you joking with me again? How about you come out first? He took a few steps back, giving Audrey space as she struggled her way out of the pouch. Once she was fully out, Edward gestured around them. The bad news is, you're no longer in Backland. Audrey's eyes widened slightly. Edward then placed a hand over his chest and gave a slight bow, like a proper gentleman. The good news is, welcome to Hogwarts. Chapter 4, Miss Justice in Wonderland. Audrey stared blankly at Edward for a moment before hesitantly speaking. Are you sure you want to keep wearing my dress? Quote. Edward was speechless. He felt as if he had punched a pillow, like he had just declared himself a ruthless killer, only for someone to ask, doesn't that make your eyes dry? Miss Justice, I think you're missing the point here. Audrey looked around curiously. The architectural style here, it really does seem different from Backland. Actually, it doesn't resemble anywhere in Lowen at all. So, have we left Lowen? Is this the Fasak Empire? Or the Intis Republic? Her question momentarily stumped Edward. This place isn't any country you're familiar with, he finally said after some thought. You could think of it as an entirely hidden place, far removed from the ordinary world. Could it be the legendary Forsaken Land of the Gods? No. Then where is it? And why did you bring me here? Audrey fixed her gaze on Edward, her emerald green eyes shimmering with an inexplicable light. It made Edward feel an almost irresistible urge to confess everything. Exclamation mark. Edward abruptly turned his head away, his tone darkening. Miss Audrey, are you using your Beander ability on me? She blinked, feigning innocence. I wish I could, but I haven't mastered any supernatural abilities yet. Edward quickly recalled what he knew. Spectator Pathway Beyonders didn't actually gain active abilities until Sequence 7, when they obtained Frenzy, Madness Inducement, Telepathy, and other skills. No, wait. To be precise, they lacked explicitly usable supernatural skills. However, even from Sequence 9, audiences could read subtle cues in people's expressions and behavior, deduce their true thoughts, and subtly influence or guide them to achieve their desired outcomes. So from the moment she innocently asked me about my dress, she was already guiding the conversation. Of course. A Sequence 9 is still Beander, don't underestimate a shrimp just because it's not a lobster. But, Miss Justice, don't you think you're being a little too reckless? Aren't you afraid I'd get mad and retaliate? Oh, right. Impulsiveness runs in the Tarot Club. Never mind. But this was tricky. One lie would require 100 more to cover it up. And lying to a spectator was simply asking for trouble. Should I just keep her trapped in the pouch and release her after 15 days? Then we can part ways forever. At that moment, Audrey lifted the black book she had been holding, a book from Edward's collection of Chinese texts. The writing in this book, Audrey's eyes narrowed. It's identical to the script invented by Emperor Russell. But Russell's characters only existed in his handwritten notes. This book, however, is clearly a professionally printed edition. Her expression grew increasingly astonished, as if she had just uncovered a shocking secret. Could it be that this language wasn't actually invented by the Emperor? That he also came from your world? She didn't say the last part out loud, about how the mysterious fool, a being possibly akin to a god, could also understand Russell's language. Miss Justice, can you stop being so smart? You're making me look stupid. Mr. Beander, Audrey started, but Edward immediately raised a hand to stop her. He massaged his temples, pacing back and forth. Hold on, give me a moment to think, or rather, improvise. You can think of this place as something similar to the Forsaken Land of the Gods. As for Russell, perhaps, maybe, possibly, he also came from our world, Edward trailed off, realizing he was completely out of ideas. Logically, he had only 3 choices. First, kill her to eliminate the risk. Second, erase her memory, though that carried a major hidden danger. Once she advanced to a higher sequence, she would definitely notice something was off. Memory manipulation was practically a spectator's speciality. Third, Keep her in the Harry Potter world, but that would disrupt the Tarot Club. Without her generous funding, could the Fool still rise in power as quickly as in the original story? And considering he was now half a part of the Lord of the Mysteries world, without the Fool to hold things together, wouldn't the apocalypse just mean his own doom? Wait, why did I just think of the apocalypse? What even is the apocalypse? Did I erase those memories? Hold on. This is the Harry Potter world, there's a much better solution right in front of me. A solution that didn't require lying, didn't risk her exposing secrets, and would bind them closely together, killing multiple birds with one stone. Within seconds, Edward's mind raced through a storm of possibilities. Once he made his decision, he exhaled deeply and turned to Audrey with a serious expression. I don't know if you can fully grasp this yet, he said, but we are no longer in our original world. A world without Loan, without Intis, without the church, without potions, without sequences, a world where nothing you know exists. If nothing unexpected happens, these two worlds are like parallel lines, never meant to intersect. Even gods, perhaps, are powerless to bridge them. My journey to your world was an accident. Bringing you back was an even greater accident. I apologize. When Edward finished speaking, Audrey simply clasped her hands behind her back, her brows slightly furrowed. You're telling me this, because I can't go back. Or is there another reason? Edward shrugged. For some reason, which even I don't fully understand, I travel between the two worlds every 15 days. That means I'll have to live in your world regularly. So, if possible, I'd like to have your help. Audrey visibly trembled. The fingers she had tightly intertwined behind her back loosened. As long as I can go back. At that moment, she finally let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had maintained a composed demeanor throughout, but in truth, it had been nothing more than feigned calm. Suddenly kidnapped by a stranger and transported to an unfamiliar world, there was no way she hadn't been scared. But reason told her that fear and panic were useless. Instead, she needed to make full use of her Sequence 9 Beyonder abilities, observing, analyzing, and understanding the boy before her to gain whatever advantage she could. If he was a good person, earning his goodwill would only be beneficial. If he was dangerous, she needed to stall for time and create opportunities to escape. So far, it seemed that luck was on her side. Ah, you actually believe me. Not completely, Audrey admitted, regaining some of her usual liveliness. Her emerald eyes sparkled with curiosity once again. For instance, if you're from another world, why do you seem so familiar with mine? And why do you speak Lonis so fluently? Edward responded without hesitation. That, I don't really know either. It's as if the moment I arrived in your world, I just, somehow knew. There's no way I'm telling her about Lord of the Mysteries. That's my only advantage right now. Audrey didn't press the issue. Instead, she took an interest in her surroundings. So, what happens next? You have two choices. Edward pointed to the pouch on the ground. 1. You stay in there. I'll provide food and water at regular intervals. I choose the other one. She raised her hand without hesitation. I've finally arrived in a completely different world. How could I possibly waste my time locked away in a pouch? Besides, the power you used earlier isn't the same as ours, is it? Can I learn it too? Does it require potions, or something else? Her decision didn't surprise Edward at all, but he still sighed and put on a troubled expression. To be honest, you're basically an illegal resident here, you understand what that means, right? I don't have a noble status like yours. If a person with no background suddenly appeared out of nowhere, it would be a huge hassle for me. That's why I'd really prefer you to pick the first option. Audrey puffed up her cheeks in protest, completely ignoring her usual noble etiquette. Edward nearly laughed at how adorable she looked. That being said, he relented, I respect your choice. But you must promise, absolutely no revealing any information about the other world. To ensure that, we'll need to sign a contract in front of a witness. Are you okay with that? That's perfectly reasonable. Good. Edward picked up the pouch and pulled out his wand. As for my abilities, they're called magic. No potions required, no risk of losing control, you just have to learn it. Scourgify. A gentle breeze swept away the dust clinging to Audrey's dress from her time inside the pouch. Aguamenti. A stream of clear water materialized in midair, perfectly falling onto Audrey's hands. Reparo. With the final spell, the torn fabric of Edward's borrowed dress seamlessly stitched itself back together, as if time itself had reversed. Whether for everyday use or in battle, magic is incredibly practical, Edward remarked. As soon as he finished speaking, however, the dress suddenly split open again. Edward held up his hands in surrender. Looks like I really do need to change. PFF'd. Audrey couldn't help but burst into laughter. As expected of the brightest jewel of Backland. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 14 comments 0 vote. Chapter 5. Old Man. Hogwarts Castle, 8th floor. Across from the tapestry depicting the attempt of Barnabas the Barmy teaching the trolls ballet, a door suddenly appeared. Edward stepped out, and before he could turn around, the door vanished once more. He stomped his foot firmly against the stone floor, finally grounding himself in the reality of the Harry Potter world again. Sigh, I really have to go see old man, huh? The headmaster's office was also on the 8th floor of the castle. According to a rather amusing rumor, Dumbledore had once wandered into the room of requirement in the middle of the night while half asleep and urgently in need of the loo, an accident that resolved itself rather conveniently. Just as Edward rounded a corner, he found someone limping toward him. The man was dressed in a tattered leather vest, his hair was disheveled, and his face was twisted in irritation. Edward, I finally found you. Good day, Mr. Filch, Edward greeted smoothly. It's summer break, and it's broad daylight. I don't believe I've broken any school rules, have I? I don't care whether you've broken rules or not. Filch roared. Can you, just keep your blasted cat away from my cat? He pointed furiously at Mrs. Norris, who was following closely behind him. The cat had always been scrawny with bulging eyes, but now her fur was in complete disarray, unevenly patched, and there was even a small bald spot on her head. Edward spread his hands innocently. That sounds like normal feline interaction. Besides, while Lilith can be a bit mischievous, she rarely leaves the Hufflepuff common room. If anything, I'd suggest keeping a closer eye on your cat. If I recall correctly, last time it was her who tried to steal Lilith's fish snack. You. Filch's face twisted in fury. You'd better hope I don't catch your cat causing trouble. If I do, I'll hang it from the castle gates. Edward remained unfazed and simply stepped around Filch. Pardon me, but I have an important matter to discuss with Professor Dumbledore. I will catch it misbehaving. Best of luck, Mr. Filch. Edward stopped in front of the hideous stone gargoyle guarding the headmaster's office. He still hadn't decided exactly how to explain Audrey's situation. After all, she was from another world, what kind of story should he fabricate? Cockroach cluster. The gargoyle didn't budge. Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. Sherbet lemon. At last, the gargoyle sprang to life, jumping aside as the wall behind it split in two, revealing a spiraling staircase that slowly rotated upward. Edward stepped onto the stairs and soon arrived at a gleaming oak door. Embedded in the door was a brass knocker shaped like a griffin. Before he could knock, the door silently swung open. I fail to see the wisdom in your choice of defense against the dark arts professors, sir. A sharp, scornful voice echoed from within the office. Take last year's Professor Pate, for instance. Oh, heavens. That fool actually thought it was a brilliant idea to take students into the Forbidden Forest for hands-on combat training against dark creatures. And what was the result? He became nothing more than spider dung, conveniently fertilizing the very forest he so admired. That was an unfortunate accident, Severus, came Dumbledore's calm response. Placing oneself in danger, using real experience to teach students the defense against dark magic, and choosing to stay behind to buy them time, does that not demonstrate that he was, in fact, a dedicated teacher? His sacrifice deserves respect, not ridicule. And what did those students actually learn? Snape sneered. Nothing. Nothing but sheer stupidity. At the very least, they learned to face danger. To acknowledge death. Give them a little more credit, Severus. Oh, I believe we have a visitor. Edward entered the office, his gaze sweeping over the numerous odd trinkets scattered about. The portraits of former headmasters and headmistresses on the walls were all watching the argument with interest. They seemed accustomed to it. After all, this same debate happened almost every single year, always ending with Snape storming off in disappointment. As soon as Snape spotted Edward, his scowl deepened. He instinctively wrapped his black robes around himself. Edward, he snapped, don't tell me you're here to beg for more potion ingredients again. I've told you before, I don't have endless supplies. Edward scratched his head. Professor Snape, this is the headmaster's office. Don't you think that I could have come here to see Professor Dumbledore? Dumbledore chuckled, his twinkling blue eyes crinkling behind his half-moon spectacles. HMPH. Snape let out a sharp snort, regaining his usual air of cold arrogance as he looked down at Edward. How's the brewing of Felix Felicis coming along? Edward answered obediently, still needs a little more time, Professor. You better not waste my precious ingredients. Snape huffed, sweeping toward the door. Just as he reached the threshold, he turned back. I urge you to reconsider my concerns, Headmaster, he said darkly. Don't let your foolish choices destroy Hogwarts. Dumbledore merely smiled. I am the headmaster, Severus. I will take responsibility for this school. We'll see. With a dramatic swirl of his robes, Snape disappeared like a giant bat. Have a seat, Edward, Dumbledore said warmly, conjuring a box of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans with a casual wave of his wand. Would you like some? Edward politely declined. Ever since I got a dung-flavored one, I swore never to touch them again. Oh my, dung-flavored, you say? Funny, I don't believe I've ever tried that one. The elderly wizard's expression suddenly showed a hint of genuine curiosity, as if he were considering the experience. Surely it can't be worse than the booger-flavored one, can it? Professor, must we really talk about poop right now? Dumbledore chuckled and waved his hand dismissively. My apologies. I do tend to get carried away by my curiosity for new things. Switching topics, he mused, Pomona tells me that for nearly 3 years, you've spent every holiday here at Hogwarts. Now, I'm not saying you aren't allowed to stay, but, shouldn't a young man like yourself take the chance to explore the world? Make new friends. From what I understand, you're the only student staying at the castle this summer. Then, he tapped his forehead. Oh dear, forgive me, I'm rambling again. What brings you here today? Edward hesitated for a moment before speaking. I'd like to request early permission to study apparition. Dumbledore raised an eyebrow, adjusting his glasses slightly. You are aware of how dangerous apparition can be, yes? I am, Edward nodded. But I believe that under proper instruction, I'll be able to handle it. Well, if you're certain, then I have no objections. When term begins, you may enroll in the apparition lessons alongside the 6th years. I know my request is a bit excessive, but I hope to master apparition within 2 weeks. Is that possible? Apparition was an essential survival skill, whether for home or travel. In 15 days, he would have to head to the world of Lord of the Mysteries, so he needed to learn it as soon as possible. Dumbledore looked at him in surprise. In that case, I would have to personally teach you. But you will have to wait 2 more days. As you know, I am still in the process of finding a new defense against the dark arts professor for the next term. So far, the only applicant is, Quirinus Quirrell. That turban head. Quirrell. Edward suddenly realized, so next term, the boy who lived, Harry Potter, would finally be enrolling at Hogwarts. Dumbledore casually tossed another Bertie Bott's every flavor bean into his mouth. Now then, you have something else you want to ask, don't you? Oh, lucky me, toffee flavored. I'm not sure if Professor Flitwick has mentioned this, but I have been struggling with learning the Patronus charm. I am certain my wand movements and incantations are correct, and I always recall my happiest memories. But no matter what, I can't seem to produce even the slightest reaction. Dumbledore's hand noticeably paused for a moment. Yes, I have heard about it. But for now, I don't have a definite answer. Magic often works in mysterious ways. Some people can easily cast the unforgivable curses but struggle with even the most basic transfiguration. Others may master a single spell to perfection while barely grasping others. His deep blue eyes gleamed with wisdom. However, today is not the right time to discuss this. I can tell that your true reason for coming here was not what you just mentioned. Edward's heart skipped a beat. His first thought was that Dumbledore had used legilimency on him. I understand now, the old wizard said with a sigh. I understand why you always keep a certain distance from me. The elderly headmaster looked somewhat helpless. It's true that I am a master of legilimency, but I do not make a habit of peering into others' minds at all times. Self-restraint is one of the few qualities I take pride in. Everyone has secrets they wish to keep. There's no need to apologize for that. But if you ever need anything, my door is always open to you. Dumbledore gave him a playful wink. Keeping secrets is another skill of mine that I am quite proud of. Edward hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. It's like this. I have a friend. She comes from a very ancient and remote country, a place so secluded that it rarely interacts with the outside world. She wishes to study magic at Hogwarts. Generally speaking, every Hogwarts student was registered at birth, with their name written in the Book of Admittance by the Quill of Acceptance. At the age of 11, they would then receive their letter of admission. While some students transferred in later, They were never complete unknowns, certainly not like Audrey, who was essentially an unregistered entity from another world. Dumbledore remained as warm and kind as ever. And then, looking at the old wizard who had taken him from the orphanage and always treated him well, Edward suddenly found himself unable to continue. People often spoke of Dumbledore as an old schemer, always plotting and manipulating everything behind the scenes. But looking at the events of the original story, everything he did was to protect Harry and the students of Hogwarts. This was a kind, righteous, and deeply admirable old man. At least that's what he'd like to think until proven otherwise. Edward let out a long sigh. After a brief struggle, he made up his mind. Professor, what I am about to say may sound absurd, but this is the truth of my experience. Just now, You disappeared from Hogwarts for over 20 minutes, Dumbledore suddenly interjected. Edward froze. That was neither apparition nor a portkey. It was as if you had been erased from this world entirely. You know, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't be able to keep track of every student in the castle. But this summer, you are the only one staying at Hogwarts. Dumbledore took off his half-moon glasses and gazed at him seriously. If you were to tell me that you traveled to another world during that time, I believe my response would be, oh, Merlin's beard, and I would choose to believe you. Edward was stunned. Oh, Merlin's beard. Dumbledore actually exclaimed, stroking his chin in thought. So, your friend is, what do muggles call it again? An alien. Something like that. Dumbledore chuckled. Even extraterrestrials want to enroll in Hogwarts under my leadership. What else can I say? Welcome. She is always welcome. Note, if you guys want to read 40 chapters in advance of the current story, you can support me on my Patreon. Trust me, it's awesome. Link Patreon.com IseeBLACK. Remove the brackets. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 14 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 6. The Vow. To be honest, Edward had come up with all sorts of reasons and excuses on his way here, but none of them seemed even remotely convincing enough to fool the Great White Wizard. That was why he had quickly abandoned the idea of making up a story and instead decided to confess everything, only for Dumbledore to guess most of it before he even said a word. Was this the weight of the greatest wizard in recent history? Well then, has your friend arrived? Edward opened the pouch and placed it on the floor, calling out in lowness, Audrey, you can come out now. Dumbledore leaned forward, peering into the pouch with curiosity. Then, in a serious tone, he remarked, leaving a lady in such a cramped space is hardly the act of a gentleman, wouldn't you agree? Audrey climbed out, slightly breathless, and curiously took in her surroundings. Her gaze quickly landed on the animated portraits of the headmasters hanging on the walls. The paintings were so lifelike that, for a moment, she couldn't tell if they were merely paintings or actual windows into another world. Dumbledore quickly stepped forward, extending his hand in a gentlemanly manner to help her up. May I have the honor of knowing this young lady's name? Audrey blinked her large eyes and turned to Edward for help. She couldn't understand what Dumbledore was saying, but she could tell that he seemed kind, like a well-read scholar. However, the sharpness hidden in his eyes suggested that he was far more complex than he appeared on the surface. Apologies, she doesn't speak English, Edward explained before acting as their interpreter. This is, well, the headmaster of this magical school, Professor Albus Dumbledore. He is asking for your name. This is Audrey Hall. Dumbledore took her hand and gave it a courteous air kiss. A pleasure to meet you, Miss Hall. Hello, Headmaster Dumbledore. Edward hesitated for a moment before asking, Professor, can she actually learn magic? I mean, I'm not sure if she's a muggle or not. She's already 17, after all. Rest assured, Dumbledore said with a smile. She must have had exceptionally powerful wizards in her ancestry. In a way, she is even more pure-blooded than the so-called pureblood families. She simply never had the chance to learn magic until now. More pure than purebloods. Was it because of the uniqueness of the Lord of the Mysteries world? Or had the potions altered her constitution? Or perhaps the Hall family had once produced powerful beyonders? Miss Hall, on behalf of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, I formally welcome you as a student. Without any hesitation or unnecessary formalities, Dumbledore directly extended an invitation. Audrey didn't understand what was being said, but she politely curtsied in response. The headmasters in the portraits began applauding in welcome, with Phineas Nigellus Black being particularly enthusiastic. He shouted, a wizard of such pure blood must join Slytherin. I will have Minerva handle the necessary paperwork and send out the official acceptance letter as soon as possible. Just like that, the matter was settled so easily. Was it because Dumbledore had absolute confidence in his own abilities? Or was he simply bold enough to take such a risk? Or was there another reason entirely? Edward hesitated for a long moment before finally asking, Professor, don't you have any questions about Audrey, or about where I went after I disappeared? Dumbledore smiled. No rush. We have plenty of time. Then, as if suddenly recalling something, he added, that reminds me, will you be returning to that place? In half a month. I see. Dumbledore winked at him. If you ever wish to tell me anything, I am always willing to listen. But for now, allow me to properly welcome our guest. Wait, Professor. I want to make an unbreakable vow with Audrey. Can you serve as our witness? Dumbledore raised his eyebrows slightly but nodded. Of course. Edward extended his right hand toward Audrey. Use your right hand to hold mine. Audrey hesitated for a few seconds before grasping his hand. Apologies, but I need you to kneel and face me. Quote. Well, she had no choice but to comply. The two of them knelt opposite each other before Dumbledore, their hands tightly clasped. Dumbledore placed the tip of his wand against their joined hands. For a fleeting moment, his expression turned distant, as if lost in memory. In his mind's eye, he saw himself many years ago, also kneeling with a young boy, making a similar vow in their most innocent and passionate years. But in the end, they had gone their separate ways. Edward spoke solemnly in lowness, Audrey, you will never reveal my secret to anyone from your world, correct? Audrey's expression grew tense. She nodded and replied, yes, I swear I will never tell. A thin ribbon of red fire shot from Dumbledore's wand, winding tightly around their hands. Though the flames did not cause any real harm, they burned with an intensity that made them feel seared by the weight of their promise. Edward continued, you will also never, without my permission, disclose the existence of another world to anyone, correct? Audrey bit her lip and nodded firmly. Yes. A second ribbon of fire coiled around their hands. Edward took a deep breath before stating his final vow, can I always trust you? She nodded with conviction. You can. A third ribbon of fire emerged from the wand. Edward met her gaze. All right, it's your turn now. The unbreakable vow is mutual. You can state your own terms. Audrey hesitated for a moment before saying, you promise you won't hurt me, and that you will take me back home, right? Yes. Then that's enough. The flames slowly faded, as if sinking into their skin. With that, the unbreakable vow was sealed. Dumbledore withdrew his wand, a nostalgic smile on his face. I hope this vow serves as a testament to your trust in each other, rather than as a shackle. I believe it will be the former. Edward had no doubts about Audrey's kindness. The vow was merely an extra layer of protection. He turned to Audrey, his expression apologetic. I'm sorry, Audrey. You were dragged into this because of me, and now I've forced you to endure the pain of the vow and sign a contract. But she simply smiled sweetly. Actually, this makes me feel even more reassured, don't you think? Edward froze for a moment before understanding what she meant. Dumbledore coughed lightly, a mischievous glint in his eye. Ahem, do you two plan to keep kneeling like that? If I recall correctly, in some Oriental traditions, when a man and a woman kneel facing each other, it has a different meaning. Quote. Edward quickly helped Audrey to her feet, finally releasing her small hand. At that moment, a fiery glow suddenly streaked across the office, tracing a long arc of light before coming to rest on Dumbledore's shoulder. It was Fawkes, the Phoenix. Hello, Fawkes. Edward greeted the bird. Fawkes immediately turned away, clearly displeased with this troublesome student who was always eyeing its feathers. Dumbledore listened attentively as Fawkes whispered into his ear, then turned to Edward with an apologetic look. I'm sorry, but there is an urgent matter that requires my immediate attention. Edward, I will leave Miss Hall in your care. Minerva will arrange accommodations for her. Also, you would do well to start teaching Miss Audrey English as soon as possible. Understood, Professor. Oh, and don't forget to take these Bertie Bott's every flavor beans with you. Dumbledore waved his hand and was about to disapparate with Fawkes when Edward couldn't help but ask, Professor, aren't you at all concerned about her? Dumbledore blinked and smiled. Didn't I just say? Everyone has their secrets, don't they? With a loud pop, Dumbledore and Fawkes disappeared. Wow. Is that also the magic you talked about? Instant teleportation. Audrey exclaimed in delight, already imagining what it would be like to master such an extraordinary ability. Yeah, it's a rather advanced form of magic. I haven't mastered it yet either, Edward shrugged. Alright, let's get you something to eat first, then we'll find Professor McGonagall to arrange a place for you to stay. Hogwarts' kitchen was located directly beneath the Great Hall, adjacent to the Hufflepuff common room. People often said that Hufflepuffs were food lovers, and that was more or less true. With so few entertainment options at Hogwarts, delicious food had become one of the rare sources of joy. On the way there, Audrey was like a curious child, though she remained composed. But when they passed the bizarrely complex, seemingly hyperactive staircases, she couldn't help but ask, are these designed to defend against intruders? I'd say it's more of an artistic choice. Who knew whether the person who originally designed these stairs had a grudge against Hogwarts students? Since it was summer break, the kitchen was much less busy than usual. Most of the house elves looked listless, while a few were fighting over what little work there was. Master Edward, what can I do for you? A sharp-eyed house elf apparated in front of them, staring up at him with large, eager eyes. Just prepare 2 dinner servings for us. Only 2. It looked disappointed. Then, make it 4. With pleasure, sir. The house elf disappeared again, cheerfully using magic to start preparing the meals. When they're done, please send them to the Hufflepuff common room, Edward added. Noticing that the other elves, who hadn't been able to claim any work, were now all staring at him, Edward quickly grabbed Audrey and made their escape. He would never forget the time he had been pressured into eating a 4-person meal under the expectant gazes of a dozen house elves. He had felt nauseous for days afterwards. Audrey, still recovering from the sight, asked, those little creatures, what are they? Are they some kind of extraordinary beings from your world? Sort of. They're our house elves. She was dumbfounded, waving her hands as if trying to make sense of it. But aren't elves supposed to be noble and elegant? Why are they? She suddenly covered her mouth. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult them, I just. Edward chuckled. It's fine. Different worlds, different customs. They stopped in front of a cluster of large barrels. Unlike other houses, entering the Hufflepuff common room didn't require a password or a riddle. Instead, one had to knock on the second barrel in the second row, following the rhythm of Helga Hufflepuff's name. If the rhythm was wrong, the wrong barrel was knocked, or the wrong number of knocks was made, the intruder would be doused in old, fermented vinegar that had been aging for who knew how many years. Once inside, they enjoyed a lavish dinner in the Hufflepuff common room. Despite requesting only 4 servings, the elves had brought enough food for 10 people. Audrey displayed the utmost grace and etiquette of a noble lady from Lowen. From the way she held her utensils, to the angle at which she opened her mouth, to the rhythm of her chewing, everything was executed with flawless precision, reflecting her strict family upbringing. Edward, however, didn't appreciate it at all. Instead, he just felt anxious watching her eat so painstakingly slowly. Meow. A small, agile figure darted in from the dormitory area. It leapt soundlessly onto the table, curiously glancing at Audrey before turning to Edward with another soft meow, as if questioning him. Omega backquote. It was a sleek black kitten, noticeably smaller than average. Despite its size, it was already 2 years old, possessing black-footed cat ancestry, which accounted for its petite frame. Its sapphire blue eyes gleamed like radiant gemstones, as if concealing a deep, starry sky within them. Black-footed cats were born hunters, nocturnal, swift, and deadly. They could take down prey much larger than themselves. Before transmigrating, Edward had always wanted one, but they were impossible to find in his previous world. This is my cat, Lilith. Edward beckoned, and Lilith immediately snuggled up to him, raising her tail high and rubbing affectionately against him. Every student entering Hogwarts is allowed to bring one pet, usually a choice between an owl, a toad, or a cat. Audrey swallowed her food slowly, then asked in confusion, I can understand owls and cats, but why toads? Are they a different kind of creature in your world? Not really. Keeping toads as pets is just an old tradition. Nowadays, most students prefer owls since they can deliver letters anywhere. Do you plan on getting a pet? I already have Susie. Oh, Susie is a golden retriever. Edward nodded. I know. She's the one who tore up my pant leg. And before we returned to this world, she had already figured out that I wasn't the real you. Huh. Susie told me herself. Didn't she also take a potion? He picked up Lilith by her front legs. Lilith, should I get you a potion too? Lilith, unimpressed, kicked him with her hind legs and gracefully landed back on the table. She flicked her tail and let out a series of rapid meows in protest. D. Always thinking about food. Edward flicked her nose gently before taking out a small dried fish. She grabbed it and curled up in his lap, purring contentedly as she ate. Audrey set down her utensils. I'm full. Thank you for the meal. Alright, let's go find Professor McGonagall and get your lodging sorted out. Oh, I forgot to mention, Hogwarts has 4 houses. Professor McGonagall is the head of Gryffindor. I'm in Hufflepuff, and the other 2 houses are Ravenclaw and Slytherin. You'll be interacting with all of them soon. She hesitated briefly before saying, you've been introducing me to everything here, but you've never actually introduced yourself. For example, your name. Edward was momentarily stunned before quickly apologizing. Oh, sorry. You might not believe this, but I've had this strange feeling all day, like we've known each other for a long time. Which, to be fair, was true. He extended his hand and gave a simple introduction. My name is Edward. Orphan. No last name. Of course, he did have a last name. But that had long since vanished the moment he transmigrated. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 13 comments 0 vote. Chapter 7. Diagon Alley. After dinner, Edward took Audrey to see Professor McGonagall to arrange her accommodation. Professor McGonagall's office was a small study on the 2nd floor of Hogwarts Castle, with a window overlooking the Quidditch pitch. Though she appeared strict and old-fashioned, in her youth, she had been a true Gryffindor lioness, bold, adventurous, and passionate about Quidditch. Despite it being the summer holidays, the fireplace in her office was still lit, yet the room remained at a comfortable temperature, a testament to the wonders of magic. As soon as Audrey stepped into the office, she saw a tabby cat grooming itself leisurely. For a brief moment, their gazes met, and the tabby cat's body swiftly expanded, transforming into Professor McGonagall, who now appeared as an exceptionally mature catgirl. Oh, so you must be Miss Audrey Hall, the transfer student Professor Dumbledore mentioned. That's right. Good evening, Professor McGonagall, Edward Said, once again acting as Audrey's translator. Audrey resisted the urge to ask why a person could turn into a cat. Instead, she maintained her composure, delicately pinching the hem of her dress and offering a graceful curtsy. Follow me. As always, Professor McGonagall was swift and efficient. She led them briskly to the Gryffindor dormitories, seamlessly introducing Hogwarts, explaining the Gryffindor house traditions, and arranging Audrey's room, all in one smooth motion. By the time Edward and Professor McGonagall left the Gryffindor common room, they were the only 2 remaining. Edward, over the next few days, I'd like you to teach Miss Hall some English and then take her to Diagon Alley to purchase her school supplies, Professor McGonagall instructed. Normally, this would be my responsibility, but as you know, I need to visit the Muggle world to ensure that the incoming first years can enroll on time. No problem, Professor. Oh, and one more thing, the school has allocated a scholarship fund for Miss Hall. I'll entrust it to you. Handing over a pouch filled with galleons, Professor McGonagall swiftly departed. Edward stood in the empty castle and sighed. He walked to the window, gazing at the star-strewn sky, momentarily lost in thought. Until today, his focus had been simple: study magic, locate Voldemort's Horcruxes in advance, intervene at critical moments to prevent unnecessary tragedies, and ultimately research the Philosopher's Stone, seeking immortality on the level of Nicholas Flamel. But the emergence of the Lord of the Mysteries world had forced him to reevaluate everything. Even Susie, who had only just advanced to Sequence 9, already displayed remarkable resistance to magic. Clearly, magic alone wouldn't be enough to handle the challenges of the mystical world. That meant he had to consume a potion. But which pathway should he choose? Meanwhile, having finished washing up, Audrey lay on her soft bed, unable to calm her thoughts. Before today, as the young lady of the Hall family, she had believed her experiences were already extraordinary: mysterious tarot club meetings, the powerful fool, Susie consuming potions, and countless stories and rumors about the mystical world. Yet now, a whole new world of wonders had suddenly unfolded before her. After going through fear, confusion, anxiety, and curiosity, she was left with only one feeling: excitement. She couldn't wait to see what other surprises this world had in store for her. Audrey let out a soft breath, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Good night, Hogwarts. Good night, Mom and Dad. Good night, Audrey." Then, suddenly, her eyes snapped open. Oh no. What about the weekly tarot club meeting? For the next 3 days, Edward started teaching Audrey English from scratch, beginning with the alphabet. Edward's English proficiency had come from his mastery of the language in his previous life, while his accent came as a natural benefit of his transmigration. His teaching methods were based on what he had learned from English classes in his past life. He was initially worried that he might end up turning Audrey into another, mute English learner, someone who could read and write but not speak fluently, as was common amongst Asian students in his previous world who had studied the language for over a decade yet still struggled with conversation. However, he soon realized that he had completely overthought it. People from the mystical world seemed to have an extraordinary talent for learning languages and acquiring esoteric knowledge. In the supernatural circles, not knowing Jotun, Hermes, or Elvish was practically embarrassing. Even someone as lazy as Danitz could speak multiple mystical languages proficiently. Seizing the opportunity, Edward had Audrey teach him Hermes as well. After all, aside from Lonus, he hadn't acquired any other mystical languages. After 3 days of study, Audrey had already mastered basic daily conversations, while Edward's progress was much slower. Even Lilith, who had been lounging nearby the whole time, occasionally cast him a look of disdain. Quote. It's definitely because I haven't taken a potion yet. Edward consoled himself. Yeah, that must be it. Audrey comforted him in return. And just like that, the day for their trip to Diagon Alley finally arrived. Originally, Edward had planned to use Professor McGonagall's office fireplace to travel via flow network directly to the Leaky Cauldron. However, Professor McGonagall had left early in the morning, so he had no choice but to turn to Dumbledore. The moment Fawkes delivered them to the entrance of Diagon Alley, the Phoenix let out a sharp crack and vanished, so swiftly that Edward didn't even get the chance to thank him. Honestly, Edward felt a little wronged. Back when he had asked Fawkes for a feather, all he had wanted was to make a few more twin wands, like Voldemort's. Imagine the final battle, everyone wielding a wand that could counter the Dark Lords. That would surely teach that dark fucker the true meaning of despair. Before them stretched a cobbled street lined with shops on both sides. Wizards in robes of various styles bustled past, hurrying along their way. For the past few days, Audrey had only interacted with Edward, Professor McGonagall, and a handful of others at Hogwarts. Now, suddenly finding herself surrounded by so many people, especially with quite a few casting admiring glances her way, she felt a little overwhelmed. Edward handed her an envelope. This is your Hogwarts acceptance letter from Professor McGonagall. He shrugged. It's a little late, but at least you get to experience the official process and ceremony. Audrey opened the letter and saw elegantly handwritten words, penned with a quill. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore. Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorc, CHF. Warlock. Supreme Mugwump, International Confed. Of Wizards. Dear Miss Hall, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on the 1st of September. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall. Deputy Headmistress. Second page. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First-year students will require 1. 3 sets of plain work robes black. 2. 1 plain pointed hat black for day wear. 3. 1 pair of protective gloves dragon hide or similar. 4. 1 winter cloak black, with silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothes should carry name tags. Course books. All students should have a copy of each of the following. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1. By Miranda Goshawk. A History of Magic. By Bathilda Bagshot. Magical Theory. By Adalbert Waffling. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. By Emmerich Switch. 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi. By Felida Spore. Magical Drafts and Potions. By Arsenius Jigger. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. By Newt Scamander. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection. By Quentin Trimble. Other equipment. 1 wand. 1 cauldron, pewter, standard size 2. 1 set glass or crystal phials. 1 telescope. 1 set brass scales. Students may also bring, if they desire, an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomstick. Yours sincerely, Lucinda Thompsonical Pocus, Chief Attendant of Witchcraft Provisions. Although Audrey could now manage simple conversations in English, reading the letter was still a challenge. Seeing this, Edward simply read it out loud in Lonus for her. Our goal today is to follow this list and get everything you need. Edward sighed, leading her toward Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. First, let's get you a proper set of wizarding robes. You can't keep wearing that dress everywhere. The moment they stepped into the shop, a short and plump Madame Malkin greeted them enthusiastically, her smile exaggerated and her tone dramatic. Oh, my dear. I swear, you are the most beautiful young lady I've ever seen. You must be heading to Hogwarts, yes. But why have I never seen you before? I just transferred to Hogwarts. This is my first time here. Audrey answered in surprisingly fluent English and even remembered to add, thank you for your kind words. Madame Malkin flicked her wand, and several measuring tapes flew to Audrey's side, automatically taking her measurements as the seamstress jotted down notes. Oh, what absolutely perfect proportions. Once the robes are finished, may I keep your photograph in my shop? Audrey, fascinated by the floating measuring tapes, nodded slightly. That would be fine. The process of making her robes took far longer than Edward's had. Madame Malkin treated it as if she were crafting a priceless masterpiece, ensuring every stitch and thread was flawless. More customers came and went, but she barely acknowledged them. Eventually, she simply shut the shop doors. All right, my dear. Nearly 2 hours later, Madame Malkin stepped back and admired Audrey in her new Hogwarts uniform. I swear, this is the finest work of my life. Edward, who had been dozing off from boredom, immediately perked up and prepared to pay. How dare you tarnish such a perfect masterpiece with money? Madame Malkin huffed indignantly. It's free. From now on, every uniform she needs will be free. Edward and Audrey exchanged glances. Being good-looking really is a privilege, Edward muttered. Thank you, Audrey said with a laugh. Unlike the empty flattery she often received in Backland, she could tell that Madame Malkin's admiration was heartfelt. After that, they quickened their pace. To avoid further incidents like this, Edward bought her a mask to wear. They swiftly gathered the rest of her supplies, cauldron, textbooks, quills, ink, and parchment. Soon, only one thing remained, a wand. Ollivander's was a small, worn-down shop. The golden lettering on the sign above the door had faded with age, but it still read. Ollivander's, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. Through the dusty display window, a single wand rested on a faded purple cushion. Oh, if it isn't Mr. Edward. An elderly man with pale skin and silver eyes emerged from the dimly lit shop. I remember you. Blackthorn wood, phoenix feather core, 14 3/4 inches, firm and powerful, well suited for casting strong magic. I have no doubt you will make a fine ore someday. Audrey, using her spectator ability, quickly analyzed him. This old gentleman was clearly confident in his expertise. His effortless recollection of his customers and their purchases wasn't just a showcase of memory, it was a subtle way of establishing his authority and influence. And as for this lovely young lady, Ollivander's keen gaze shifted to Audrey. I believe you have not purchased a wand from me before, correct? You have an excellent memory, Mr. Ollivander, Edward praised as usual. Today, I'm here to help this transfer student find her wand. Oh, how wonderful. Ollivander responded cheerfully, pulling a long measuring tape with silver markings from his pocket. Which hand do you use for casting, miss? Audrey hesitated. She had never actually considered this question before. I suppose, my right hand. Excellent. Ollivander expertly measured her arm length, hand size, and even the space between her fingers. A proper wand must not only align with your magical nature but also fit your body's proportions. After all, in a duel, even a second's delay in drawing your wand could be the difference between victory and defeat. He turned to the towering shelves packed with wand boxes and began his search. Now then, let's see which wand chooses you. Note, if you liked the book so far, please don't forget to leave a review. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK Creators Thoughts. 7 comments 0 vote. Chapter 8. To hell with it. Ollivander moved skillfully through the shelves, his arms filling up with long wand boxes. A few minutes later, he placed 7 or 8 of them on the table and took one out, handing it to Audrey. I believe a lady as beautiful as you would be best suited for this one. Unicorn hair core, walnut wood, 7 3/4 inches long. A perfect match for your proportions. Edward had already explained to her the importance of wands to wizards. So, when she finally held one in her hands, she couldn't help but feel a little excited. However, before she could even give it a wave, Ollivander quickly snatched it back. Oh no, this one doesn't suit you at all. I can't sense any magical resonance. Edward sighed and rubbed his forehead. Here we go again. This old wandmaker, with decades of experience, was a master bullshitter. Every young witch or wizard who stepped into his shop would walk out with the illusion of being unique, of being the protagonist of their own story. Ollivander picked up another wand. Let's try this one, Hollywood, dragon heartstring, quite flexible. Audrey took the wand and gently swished it. A soft breeze stirred in the shop, bringing with it a pleasant sensation. Oh, this one seems quite suitable. Edward was surprised. Already. The second wand. Did Audrey's age make her less susceptible to Ollivander's usual theatrics? But the old wandmaker wasn't done yet. He pulled out another. Let's try this one, ebony wood, dragon heartstring, 8 inches long. Audrey gave it a wave. The same soft breeze followed. Marvelous, marvelous, simply marvelous, Ollivander praised. But what about this one? Acacia wood, dragon heartstring, 8¼ inches. The result was identical. Audrey continued testing another 7 or 8 wands, all with dragon heartstring cores. Each one seemed to resonate with her. Ollivander grew increasingly astonished. This is truly unprecedented. I've never met someone who harmonizes so well with so many different wands. And yet, I still feel none of them are the perfect match for you. Edward whispered, Audrey, how do these wands feel when you use them? She thought for a moment before replying, it's fascinating. It feels like an amplifier, it enhances my senses and intuition. And besides that, Audrey gripped the wand more tightly and concentrated. It seems, my observational abilities have also improved. For example, I can see the guilt hiding in your eyes. Quote question mark question mark question mark quote. Edward instinctively turned away from her gaze but quickly composed himself. What guilt? I have nothing to feel guilty about. She didn't press further, only giving him a knowing smile. Damn, spectators, are the worst. Edward wasn't actually guilty of anything, he was just hesitating on whether or not to introduce Audrey to the modern world outside of the magical one. Compared to Hogwarts, which bore some resemblance to Lowen, a bustling metropolis would be far more of a shock to her. Just then, Ollivander emerged from the corner, holding a long-forgotten box covered in dust. At last. This is a wand I crafted in my younger days, purely out of curiosity. Ah, here comes the cliché. Edward mused. He opened the case, revealing a wand as translucent as white agate, more akin to a piece of fine art than a tool of magic. Dragon bone and dragon heartstring, 9 inches long. I once believed that the wizard who wielded it would possess magic as fierce as a fire dragon. But alas, no one has ever been recognized by it. Give it a try, my dear. As soon as she held it, a refreshing coolness spread through her hand. The texture was smoother than any wooden wand she had tried. If the others felt like extensions of her arm, this one felt like it had fused completely with her being. Audrey gave it a gentle wave. A violent gust of wind howled through the shop, yet, strangely, nothing was disturbed. It was as if the wind existed outside the physical world. Spectacular. Simply spectacular. This wand was made for you. The old wandmaker danced with joy, as if he had just achieved something extraordinary. Then, in the next second, his tone changed as he extended his hand toward Edward. That'll be 98 galleons. Edward was stunned. 98 galleons. Aren't first-year wands standardized at 7 galleons? Ollivander shrugged. That's for common materials. This wand is crafted from a fire dragon's skull, specifically, the bone that connects its forehead to its brain. Edward gritted his teeth. You scammer. Audrey gently poked him and whispered, I will repay you double when we get back. Oh, right. How could he forget? She was a real rich lady, money wasn't an issue for her. Just as Edward handed over a pouch of gold galleons, the ground suddenly trembled. A deafening roar echoed through Diagon Alley. The street fell silent for a moment before wizards and witches turned toward the sound. A few pointed to the sky, shouting in panic, a dragon. It's a dragon. The Gringotts dragon has escaped. In the distance, Gringotts was in ruins. A massive fire-breathing dragon stood atop the shattered rooftops, letting out a furious roar. Holy shish. Edward was utterly dumbfounded. Wasn't the dragon escape seen in the 6th or 7th book? What the hell is going on? Wait a second, in the first book, Quirrell broke into Gringotts under Voldemort's orders to steal the Sorcerer's Stone, but, did it cause this much of a mess? Audrey, fascinated, observed the scene with wide eyes. Is that a dragon from your world? In the Lord of the Mysteries universe, most supernatural creatures lived in remote areas, rarely seen by humans. Even Beyonders only encountered them in potion ingredients, eyes, claws, brains, and so on. Ollivander clicked his tongue and sighed. I knew this day would come, but I didn't expect it so soon. Those greedy goblins, they thought they could imprison a majestic fire dragon to guard their vaults. That's an insult to freedom. A disgrace to all living beings. Then, as if he had just thought of something, he added with a glint in his eye, Tisk, better to just kill it and use its remains to craft more wands. Edward glanced at him in disbelief. You're not any better, old man. The fire dragon gave a powerful flap of its wings, staggering into the air. In its clumsy ascent, it crashed through the rooftops of more than a dozen buildings before finally regaining its balance and soaring higher. Ruar. The dragon circled over Diagon Alley, letting out deep, rumbling growls, refusing to leave. Isn't anyone going to do something about this? Who would dare? Ollivander snorted. The goblins consider that dragon their private property. If someone tries to intervene and gets burned, the goblins might even use it as an excuse to demand compensation. Ah, but look, the Aurors have finally arrived. The old wandmaker, having enjoyed enough of the spectacle, leisurely turned and strolled back into his shop. A group of wizards in Auror robes began their assault on the dragon. It endured dozens of direct magical attacks before finally roaring in pain. Enraged, it unleashed a series of blazing infernos before taking off into the sky, vanishing beyond the horizon. The Aurors quickly mounted their brooms and gave chase. And with that, the dramatic show came to an end. The gathered crowd erupted into chatter, most of them gloating over the goblins' misfortune. Clearly, many took pleasure in seeing Gringotts suffer. Edward was about to suggest they move on when Audrey suddenly whispered, Edward. What is it? I have this strange feeling, that dragon was looking for me. There was uncertainty in her tone. But that doesn't make any sense, does it? She lowered her gaze to the crystalline wand in her hand. Could it be because of this? For a brief moment, Edward was caught off guard, but then a possibility crossed his mind. It might have something to do with the potion Audrey had taken. The spectator pathway once belonged exclusively to dragons. As one ascended to higher sequences, they gradually developed draconic traits. Perhaps the combination of her Beyander abilities and the wand, crafted from dragon bone and dragon heartstring, created some kind of unusual reaction, drawing the fire dragon's attention. Of course, this was all just speculation. With a chuckle, he waved it off. Don't overthink it. It's probably just your imagination. Anyway, we have an appointment with Fox at 1 o'clock. We still have an hour, let's look around and grab something to eat. As he turned, his gaze landed on a massive figure pushing a cart stacked high with goods. Beside him was a small boy with round glasses and messy black hair. Hagrid and Harry Potter. Without hesitation, Edward cast a disillusionment charm on himself, blending into the background. Hagrid paused, scratching his head in confusion. Huh, did I imagine that? What's wrong, Hagrid? I thought I saw a friend of mine, Hagrid muttered. He's one of your future schoolmates, just like me, he loves magical creatures. But, Hagrid hesitated before adding, he enjoys them in a different way than I do. I don't get it, Harry said, frowning. He's more interested in their flavors. Quote question mark exclamation mark quote. Once the two had walked away, Edward lifted his spell and reappeared. That big guy is kind of a friend of mine, he said casually. A really warm-hearted and straightforward fellow. But we still have things to take care of, so I figured we'd skip the small talk. Audrey, naturally observant, could tell he wasn't being entirely honest. In truth, Edward simply wanted to avoid getting too involved with Harry Potter. He didn't want to interfere with the story too soon. The more control he had over future events, the better he could plan ahead. Once his strength was sufficient, he would take steps to deal with Voldemort in advance. That was the essence of strategic foresight. For a transmigrator, knowing the plot was one of the greatest cheat codes one could have. Just then, two passing wizards caught Edward's attention. Did you hear? One of them said to his companion. That dragon was released because someone broke into Gringotts. No way, who'd have the guts to do that? You won't believe it. We saw him earlier in the leaky cauldron, Quirinus Quirrell, that bloke with the bandages wrapped around his head. Supposedly, he's the new defense against the dark arts professor at Hogwarts next term. Impressive. Impressive my ass. When the dragon broke out, it stepped right on him. Crushed him flat, his brains splattered all over the place. Ah, what a way to go. Hogwarts' defense against the dark arts professors really are cursed. Shish. Don't mention him. The two men walked off, still talking in hushed voices. Edward, however, was frozen in shock. Quirrell is dead. The same Quirrell who was possessed by Voldemort in the Philosopher's Stone. Just dead, like that. Then what about Voldemort? Was he dead too? Or had he jumped into another host? And what about the plot of the first book? Without Quirrell, would the story even follow the original timeline? That seemed highly unlikely. Holy shish. To hell with the plot. To hell with the future. To hell with all the careful planning. Note: don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. I'll release the chapter schedule after the first 30 chapters are released. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 13 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 9. Miss Justice's Dilemma. Edward had no choice but to accept reality. The plot of Harry Potter had collapsed before it even began. If this had happened before he transmigrated into the world of Lord of the Mysteries, he would have been depressed for 3 days straight. But now, at least he could comfort himself with the knowledge that as long as he chose the right potion pathway and successfully advanced to a midsequence, Voldemort wouldn't be a threat at all. So, in the days that followed, he doubled his efforts in learning Hermes. By the time Audrey could converse fluently in English, he had memorized most common Hermes vocabulary. By the time she started researching ways to self-study magic, he had already grasped several simple Hermes incantations and their corresponding rituals. Gryffindor Common Room. Audrey, holding a copy of A History of Modern Magic, poked Edward, who was buried under a pile of books, muttering words to himself. Muda, muda, muda. The book says that wizarding spells are mainly divided into regular spells and dark arts. Hogwarts primarily teaches regular spells, so where does one learn dark arts? Without even lifting his head, Edward replied, only dark wizards study the dark arts. But dark arts are generally stronger than regular spells. If we don't learn them, how are we supposed to fight dark wizards? That's why Hogwarts has a subject called Defense Against the Dark Arts. It's meant to teach students how to defend against them. Just defend. Audrey leaned in closer, gazing directly into Edward's eyes. So, do you know dark arts? Of course, he did. It would be shameful as a transmigrator if he didn't. He had mastered most of the commonly used dark curses, thanks to a dark wizard who had once ambushed him in Nocturne Alley. After counter-cursing the man, Edward had extracted every bit of dark magic knowledge from his mind before wiping his memory clean, reducing him to an empty shell. However, since J.K. Rowling constantly emphasized that the dark arts could corrupt a person's character, and since he hadn't encountered any real danger afterwards, Edward had never actually had a chance to use what he had learned. With a light cough, he replied, when the time is right, I'll teach you. Thank you. Audrey gracefully waved her wand, making her book flip through its pages on its own. Her composed, effortless demeanor hardly matched someone who had only been self-studying magic for a single day. The difference between people really was bigger than the gap between a person and a pig. While Audrey immersed herself in the wonders of magic, Edward focused on a more crucial matter, his first real choice of potion pathway. He wrote down all 22 Beyonder pathways. First of all, prisoner, criminal, planter, apothecary, and marauder are all off the table. Fate-related pathways are best avoided too. As for witch, no thanks. That leaves 15 pathways. If I were going purely by personal preference, I'd lean toward secret supplicant or apprentice. Both the shepherd from the secret supplicant pathway and the scribe from the apprentice pathway can obtain abilities from other pathways, which makes them highly adaptable, kind of like how I'm used to the variety of wizarding spells. But the secret supplicant pathway has the constant risk of getting turned into a lunatic by the true creator. Apprentice, on the other hand, isn't bad. I'll put it on hold for now. That leaves, Edward's pen tapped the parchment. Spectator, but Audrey's already on that pathway, so it's a lower priority. Lawyer and arbiter are mostly controlled by the royal family and the military, but if I stick with Klein, once he gets the Black Emperor card, obtaining formulas wouldn't be an issue. Speaking of formulas, if I chose the reader pathway, I'd be able to clearly recall all the original novel's details. That means I'd know most of the potion formulas, right? But what would I even do with those formulas? Sell them. Choosing a pathway just for money is way too short-sighted. Wait, I forgot to consider divinity and ascension. Edward quickly crossed out a few more pathways. That leaves hunter, lawyer, warrior, seer, and death. No, wait, death is off the table too. Leaning back in his chair, he muttered. Do I really need to think that far ahead? Becoming a god isn't that easy. And it's not like the sky will fall on me. Klein is the one carrying that burden. I just need to ensure my own safety. The higher the sequence, the greater the danger. Honestly, sequence 4 is already more than enough. A long lifespan, immense power, and no need to worry about godhood. At that thought, he slapped his forehead. Am I being too much of a slacker? Wouldn't this be embarrassing for other transmigrators? Tapping his steel pen against his lips, he murmured. So, the formulas for these pathways, damn it. I can't remember a single one. The hunter pathway's formulas were mainly in the Intis Republic. The lawyer pathway was controlled by the Loan royal family. The warrior pathway's formulas could be obtained from Little Sun in the City of Silver. The seer pathway could be found through Old Neil and Klein. Theoretically, of course, he could also try to purchase them at a Beander gathering. As for apprentice, he circled it again. Let's keep it as a backup option. And so, with studying as his daily routine, time quickly passed, bringing them into the second week. It was then that Dumbledore finally sought Edward out, to teach him apparition. Apologies, Dumbledore said with a smile. I've been busy dealing with the search for a new defense against the dark arts professor. You know, Professor Quirrell's death was rather unexpected. Edward raised an eyebrow. Professor, why won't you just give Professor Snape a chance? Dumbledore chuckled warmly but did not continue the topic. I'll give it some thought. Now, back to apparition. You've probably heard this before. When it comes to apparition, the most important thing is to remember the 3 Ds: destination, determination, and deliberation. You must fix your mind on your destination, without the slightest hesitation or fear. As he spoke, Dumbledore's figure disappeared with a sharp crack, only to reappear a few meters away. See. Quite simple, isn't it? Edward rolled his eyes. Quote. Yeah, right. Dumbledore burst into hearty laughter. Ha ha ha. Well then, let's start with the basics. Your first apparition target will be, let's set it right behind Fawkes. With a wave of his wand, he drew a circle on the floor behind the phoenix. Fawkes, who had been dozing off, was startled awake. He flapped his wings in protest, ruffled his feathers, and then tucked his head back in, looking drowsy again. Audrey, who was hugging Lilith in her arms, couldn't help but chuckle as she began to mentally go over the theory of apparition. Now, Dumbledore continued, focus your determination on occupying the space behind Fawkes. Let your desire to reach that spot flood every inch of your being. Then, spin in place to enter the void state, stay calm and composed. Begin. Crack. A loud noise echoed through the room. Edward was momentarily stunned, he hadn't even started yet. I did it. Audrey's excited voice came from behind Fawkes. Her face lit up with delight. It really is simple. No, Miss Hall, Dumbledore's kind smile faded as he shook his head. You were too impatient. Perhaps basic spells come easily to you, but never underestimate the complexity of advanced magic. Ah. A second later, Audrey let out a belated scream of horror. She had just realized that her right arm and left leg were still left behind at her original spot. Meanwhile, Lilith was curled up comfortably on her detached leg, enjoying the sensation of fingers absent-mindedly stroking her fur. Omega backquote. The sudden scream startled Lilith awake. The cat froze upon realizing that only a leg and an arm remained in front of her, and then immediately puffed up in terror. Greater than D less than O less than P greater than. The scene was genuinely horrifying. A beautiful girl was indeed beautiful, but a dismembered beautiful girl. That was pure nightmare fuel. Don't just stand there, Edward. Bring her arm and leg over, Dumbledore instructed calmly. Professor, could you not say such terrifying things so casually? Edward sighed. You could have just used Accio or a levitation charm, you know. Despite his complaints, he still picked up Audrey's arm with his left hand and slung her leg over his right shoulder, looking like a serial killer caught in the act. Audrey's fear only deepened. A moment later, Dumbledore cast a healing spell, seamlessly restoring her to normal. She collapsed onto the sofa, still trembling, her face streaked with tears of lingering terror. Edward smirked, clearly enjoying himself. Audrey, you still have a lot to learn. She had no energy left to maintain her usual grace. She glared at him fiercely, her face pale and her heart still pounding. Magic was terrifying. Even scarier than taking potions. After the short-lived horror show, Edward resumed practicing apparition. However, with the fresh trauma of Audrey's failed attempt still in his mind, he found himself struggling with the third D, deliberation. No matter what he did, he couldn't stay calm. Finally, he turned to Dumbledore for help. Professor, the way you're teaching apparition, it doesn't seem much different from how the ministry instructors do it. But you're the greatest wizard, surely you have a special trick. A trick. Dumbledore, seated behind his desk, adjusted his half-moon spectacles. No, not really. When my teacher explained the method to me, I just learned it. Edward fell silent. This man was a natural-born genius. A living legend. A league of his own. Utterly untouchable. Actually, learning apparition is mostly about overcoming your own psychological barriers, Dumbledore added after some thought. The only reassurance I can give you is this: as long as I'm here, you don't have to worry about Splinching killing you. Edward's mind suddenly cleared. He gripped his wand, fixed his gaze on the space behind Fawkes, and spun. In the blink of an eye, he appeared right behind the phoenix, without any splinching. I did it. Audrey looked over enviously, her fingers twitching with the urge to try again. Excellent, Dumbledore nodded approvingly. Next, you'll need to practice imagining your destination instead of relying on direct sight. If you only apparate to places you can see, your range will be extremely limited. I've lifted the apparition restrictions between my office and the Hufflepuff common room. You can practice between these two locations freely. Understood, Professor. By the way, what happens if I try to apparate to a place I've never been to before? Dumbledore's brow furrowed slightly. I strongly advise against it. Don't forget, the first D stands for destination. If you're unsure of your target location, the risk of splinching increases significantly. Got it, Professor. Crack. Edward vanished on the spot. About 10 seconds later, he walked back in through the door, smiling cheerfully at Audrey. See, it really is simple. Miss Justice puffed up her cheeks in frustration. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 7 comments 0 vote. Chapter 10. Return to the World of Mysteries. Dumbledore smiled gently. It's all right, Miss Hall. Although you failed just now, you clearly have an exceptional talent for apparition. Once you've learned more magic and mastered your internal magic flow, you'll be able to apparate naturally. Audrey beamed and thanked him sweetly. Thank you, Professor. Over the next 2 days, Edward took every opportunity to practice apparition, even when going to the bathroom. His progress was evident, and he quickly became more proficient. By the 3rd day, he was apparating frequently between the Hufflepuff common room and Hogsmeade. By the 5th day, he had ventured to Diagon Alley, Nocturne Alley, and other locations. By then, he had fully mastered apparition. During this time, he had a private conversation with Dumbledore, selectively sharing some information about the Mysteries world. Dumbledore simply asked a few questions about potions, then nodded thoughtfully before dropping the topic. The night before returning to the Mysteries world. As the day of their return approached, both Edward and Audrey found themselves strangely disinterested in their studies. It was as if they had made a silent agreement to slack off. The two of them sat in the Quidditch stands, gazing at the forbidden forest in the distance. Edward was teasing Lilith with a small dried fish. The little cat leapt and pounced but could never quite catch it, growing so frustrated that she grabbed Edward's hand and started gnawing on it. Biao backquote. We will make it back safely, right? Audrey inhaled deeply, her face filled with uncertainty. Edward tossed the dried fish into the air. Lilith sprang forward and caught it midair. He chuckled and asked, You're only thinking about this now. It's not that, she admitted. Before, I could only reassure myself by believing it. But now that it's actually happening tomorrow, I feel scared. There's a saying for that, near home fear. Edward recalled a phrase he read in a Chinese book, then translated into Lonis. She tilted her head slightly. Was that the same language as the handwriting in Emperor Russell's manuscripts? How did you even guess that? Your sixth sense is way too sharp. It wasn't a guess, she smirked. I looked through all the books in your undetectable extension pouch. Aside from books in English and Ancient Latin, there were few in that language too. You can read Ancient Latin. If you want to understand more magical texts, Ancient Latin is basic knowledge, isn't it? Also, don't change the subject. Edward shrugged helplessly. All right, you got me. Yes, it's the same language from Russell's manuscripts. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. I want to learn it. Edward flicked her raised hand down with a sigh. Weren't you just having a near-home fear moment? What happened to that? The thought of being able to read the Emperor's manuscripts made my fear disappear, she said enthusiastically. Now, I'm actually looking forward to it. We'll talk about it next time, Edward muttered to himself. When she sees all of Russell's romantic affairs, and his taste of a demoness ain't bad comments, her worldview is going to shatter. Oh, right. Edward suddenly smacked his forehead. About my potions, do you have any suggestions? Well, I've only recently started exploring the path of the mystical, if it weren't for. Audrey's heart skipped a beat. Audrey, you almost blurted out the Tarot Club. But, Edward has shared an entire world's worth of secrets with me. Would it really be right to keep the Tarot Club a secret from him? But I also promised Mr. Fool. Maybe, I could ask Mr. Fool for permission in the next tarot gathering. Maybe I could introduce Edward to the club too. Wait, it's already been 2 weeks since my last meeting. I've missed 2 gatherings in a row. Did they kick me out? A whirlwind of thoughts flooded her mind before she took a deep breath and forced herself to focus. I only became a Beyander because of a friend's help, she finally said. Speaking of which, that friend planned to take me to a gathering of Beyonders. There might be potion formulas available there. At that, her face darkened. But, that was 2 weeks ago. Edward blinked in surprise. Huh, didn't I tell you? He asked. While we're in this world, time is practically frozen in yours. In other words, when we go back, it'll still be the same time as when you left. Really? Audrey's eyes widened in joy. A powerful wave of relief washed over her. Yes. I didn't miss the tarot meeting. I wasn't kicked out. Edward continued, but that reminds me, how am I supposed to leave your house after we return? I've mastered apparition, sure, but I can't apparate to places I've never been. That's easy, Audrey said. I'll have Susie stand guard outside. You can hide inside your extension pouch, then I'll switch places with you and sneak you out. She thought about it for a moment before adding, oh, and you don't have to worry too much about my father hunting you down. Edward raised an eyebrow. Oh. I'll just convince him that you're an extraordinary friend I met. It was all just a misunderstanding, besides, you didn't do anything that outrageous. Edward cleared his throat and raised a hand. Actually, I did. What do you mean? I, kind of, blew up your room. Quote? Audrey's emerald green eyes were filled with confusion and shock. Edward briefly explained what had happened after she entered the extension pouch. You really do think of everything, she said, though even she wasn't sure if it was genuine praise or sarcasm. Can it be restored with a repairing charm? If the damage isn't too severe, it should be possible, Edward sighed, his expression turning serious. But even though Reparo is just a basic spell, its effects are almost like reversing time. I wouldn't recommend using it so openly. Then I guess I'll just have to say goodbye to all my dresses, she said with a sudden laugh. Honestly, I've had enough of those cumbersome, restrictive gowns anyway. But I'm sure your parents will more than compensate for the loss by buying you even more dresses. That's the world of rich, after all. Audrey pursed her lips slightly. Thank you for reminding me. Edward burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. After 2 weeks in another world, Audrey's personality had undergone noticeable changes. Here, she didn't have to worry about how others perceived her or deal with the complexities of noble society. At the end of the day, she was still just a 17-year-old girl. However, the years of education and etiquette ingrained in her would likely resurface the moment she returned to her usual environment, restoring her as the brightest gem of Backland. The next day, room of requirement, Hogwarts. Edward took out a small vial of polyjuice potion and sipped a bit, waiting for the transformation to take effect. Audrey watched curiously. The books say that the taste of polyjuice potion is different for everyone. What does mine taste like? Why don't you try it yourself? Ew. No way. It's definitely disgusting. Well, to be honest, the texture isn't great, but the taste isn't too weird. It's much better than the ones I've had before. As they spoke, Edward's body began to change. Soon, he had taken on Audrey's appearance, though his clothes now hung loosely on him. Even though I've seen this before, it's still amazing, like looking into a mirror. She reached out and poked his cheek with a finger. Huh, so my skin is this good. Edward pointed his wand at his clothes. Vestes mutatio. His wizard robes quickly transformed into a dress identical to Audrey's. She froze for a moment before puffing out her cheeks in protest. So you do know that spell? Edward immediately realized she was referring to the time when he made her change clothes. He quickly defended himself. The transfiguration effect of Vestes mutatio only lasts for half a day. I had no idea if I'd even be coming back, so changing manually was the safer option. Audrey narrowed her green eyes and locked onto his gaze. Her expression seemed to say, are you really going to lie in front of a spectator? Edward coughed awkwardly and quickly averted his gaze, pretending to check their supplies. Ahem. We've got less than 30 minutes left. Did you bring everything? Just my wand, a few magic books, and 2 bags of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. Edward raised an eyebrow. You actually like those? Of course not, she smirked. I'm bringing them for my friends. Her eyes gleamed mischievously as she thought of Annie, Hibbert, and Viscount Glaint, imagining their reactions when they tasted some of the special flavors. Edward chuckled. Well, best of luck to them. Audrey suddenly hesitated before asking, Are you sure you don't want to bring Lilith with us? It'll be 15 days before we can come back. Your world is too dangerous. I can't even guarantee my own safety, so it's better not to take any risks. Don't worry, I've already entrusted her to Professor McGonagall. Audrey sighed regretfully. I really wanted to introduce Lilith to Susie. After chatting for a bit longer, Audrey finally climbed into the extension pouch. Now, the vast room of requirement was empty, leaving Edward standing alone. He fixed his gaze on the clock on the wall, watching as the seconds ticked away. Merlin, please let everything go smoothly, he murmured. When the clock's hands struck 5, Edward's figure vanished into thin air. Note: don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 8 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 11. Just a dog. This time, the transition wasn't as dramatic or intense as it had been 15 days ago when Edward traveled to the Harry Potter world. He merely felt a blur before his eyes, and the next moment, he was back in the room where he had left. The grayish-white void swiftly regained its colors, and time resumed its flow. A golden retriever, Susie, was staring at him. Is she still alive? Her back arched as she assumed a pouncing stance, her eyes filled with seriousness. When you used extraordinary abilities earlier, you always had to wave that stick. But just now, I confirmed that the stick wasn't on you. I don't want to hurt you, so tell me, where is Audrey? Edward silently pulled out his wand, the very one he had deliberately hidden in his sleeve before traveling, just in case. Susie. She instinctively took a step back, sticking out her tongue and putting on a foolishly innocent expression. Would you believe me if I said I'm just a dog? Edward couldn't help but laugh. Actually, I'm Audrey's friend. This was all just a misunderstanding. You're absolutely right. Seriously. I believe you. Edward rubbed his forehead. Is there still anyone watching outside? The Beyonders have all left. You're safe for now. Edward waved his wand, casting a muggle-repelling charm over the room. Then, he jumped off the bed and placed the extension pouch on the ground. Susie remained in the corner, watching him warily from the shadows. Her muscles were tense, showing she hadn't fully let her guard down. Are we really back? The moment Audrey climbed out of the pouch and saw the familiar surroundings, she let out a long breath. Only now did she truly feel relieved. But then, she frowned slightly. Backland's air really needs some regulation. The air in the rich districts is already pretty good. You should visit the slums sometime. I will. Susie happily ran over. That's great, Audrey. You're safe. So this person really is your friend. That's right. Audrey smiled as she petted the golden fur around Susie's neck. Long time no see, Susie. Your lowness has improved a lot. Susie. It's only been half an hour, though. Also, Audrey felt a little different. But her scent was the same. Are there any Beyonders nearby? Susie wagged her tail, her energy returning. None in the villa, but as for farther away, I'm not sure. Do you want me to check? Go ahead. With practiced ease, she opened the door and dashed out at full speed. Edward walked to the extension pouch, placing one foot on the staircase inside. He turned to Audrey and said, I'll leave the rest to you. Audrey glanced inside the pouch, tilting her head. So this is what it looks like from the outside, huh? Don't worry, this secret will stay between the two of us. At most, Susie can be included. The pouch snapped shut, and darkness enveloped the space inside. Edward collapsed onto the couch and looked around. Feels a bit cramped. I should expand the space further, or maybe just ask old Dumbles to buy a suitcase from that Newt guy. Suddenly, he scratched his head in confusion. Wait, did I forget something? Inside the luxurious Hall family villa, Audrey had been waiting in her room for quite a while, yet no one came to check on her. Under normal circumstances, even if they wanted her to rest, they wouldn't completely ignore her like this. She decided to take the initiative. Father. In the living room, Earl Hall wore a stern expression as he spoke to her older brother, Hibbert Hall. Several maids stood at a distance, their heads lowered, silent as though afraid to make a sound. Hearing her voice, Earl Hall turned and asked, Audrey, why are you out here? Earl Hall immediately walked over and helped Audrey sit down. How are you feeling now? I'm fine. Don't worry, Audrey. We will catch that damned criminal. Hibbert declared furiously. This. Audrey felt helpless. If she told her father, that criminal is actually my friend, he would probably lose his mind. Father, I'd like to visit the church and pray for the goddess's blessing. May I? No. Earl Hall rejected her request without hesitation. What you need to do now is rest and wait for that scoundrel to be caught. But I still feel a little scared. Earl Hall's face softened with distress. Then I'll invite Archbishop St. Anthony to come over. He can bless you on behalf of the goddess. That won't be necessary, Father. Waiting a few days and going to church later will be the same. She lifted her skirt slightly and curtsied. I'll return to my room to rest now. You, escort Audrey back. Two maids accompanied Audrey back the way she had come. When they neared her room, one of them suddenly spoke up. Miss, how about switching to another room? A lot of people entered this one earlier, it needs to be cleaned. She turned to the other maid. Go clean it up. I don't think now is the time for cleaning. Why not? When do you think it should be done, then? Well, not now. Don't you agree? You have a point. Their strange conversation made Audrey pause, but then she suddenly recalled, before entering the extension pouch, Edward had cast a muggle-repelling charm on the room. The maids were clearly affected by the magic. Oh, no wonder I waited so long inside, and no one came in. But, she didn't know how to lift the spell. That's fine. You two can go back now, I'll head in myself. The two maids left without hesitation. As soon as Audrey pushed open the door and stepped into her room, Susie returned as well. Her fur was covered in bits of grass as if she had really gone out to play. Audrey, I spotted several extraordinary individuals. Thank you for your hard work, Susie. Susie happily wagged her tail, then glanced around. Is that person gone? Audrey patted the extension pouch she took from her coat. He's right here. He's really your friend. Why have I never seen him before? Well, it's a secret between the two of us. I'll tell you when I get the chance. She tilted her head in confusion. A secret. All right then. Audrey opened the pouch and called inside, Edward, you forgot to lift the muggle-repelling charm on my room. Now the maids can't even get close. Edward smacked his forehead. So that's what I forgot. My father won't let me leave the house for now, and there are still Beyonders watching outside the villa, Audrey said apologetically. I'm sorry, but you might have to stay inside for a few days. I'll bring you meals every day, though. My family's chefs are just as good as house elves. All right, no problem. Edward had no objections. Actually, I was just thinking, Susie could start roaming around the area more over the next couple of days. Gradually expand her range until those Beyonders get used to seeing her. Once they drop their guard, she can take the pouch somewhere far from your house and let me out. Audrey clapped her hands lightly. Great idea. Susie, what do you think? Susie wagged her tail joyfully, her mouth curling into a grin. No problem at all. No one would ever suspect me. After all, I'm just a dog. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK Creators Thoughts. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 12. 1.5 meter. 3 days later. With a silk bow tied around her neck, Susie left the luxurious Hall family estate as usual, happily heading out for a day of play. Along the way, she chased bees and butterflies, her smooth golden fur quickly becoming a mess, covered in grass and dirt. When she grew tired, she found a sunlit patch of grass and took a long, comfortable nap. Around noon, while lying on the ground in a daze, Susie was suddenly drawn to a hunting dog passing by. Woof, woof, woof. She sprang up and barked a few times before bolting after it. The two dogs chased each other excitedly, gradually leaving the Empress Burrow and entering the Cherwood Burrow. Just when the hunting dog was at the peak of its excitement, Susie suddenly turned around and left without warning. The poor dog stood frozen on the spot, looking as if it had just been heartlessly played by a cold-hearted woman. Up until now, Susie's usual range of activity had been within the Empress Burrow, an area populated by nobles and wealthy individuals. However, the Cherwood Burrow was clearly different, mostly inhabited by commoners, with a much higher population density and a more chaotic mix of people. She remained alert the entire way, ensuring she hadn't drawn any unwanted attention before slipping into a deserted alleyway. Once there, she untied the hidden extension pouch from her bow, using both her mouth and paws to undo the knot. Edward, who had been waiting at the entrance of the staircase inside the pouch, leapt out the moment it was opened. Without wasting time, he picked up the pouch and stuffed it into his coat. He was now dressed in a gray trench coat over a white shirt, with a black silk top hat perched on his head. Crouching in front of Susie, Edward pulled out a piece of dried chicken meat and handed it to her. Thanks, Susie. Now hurry back and be careful. Susie happily took the treat in her mouth, wagging her tail before trotting off. Phew. Edward let out a long breath. Finally free. First, I need to find a place to stay, then figure out what to do next. He pulled out a stack of banknotes, 2,000 gold pounds in total, given to him by Audrey before he left. As expected of the Tarot Club's angel investor and a true rich lady. So this is what it feels like to have a powerful backer. Truly, relying on the rich is a short-term thrill, but relying on them every day, that's eternal bliss. Klein, the god of poverty, must be crying in the bathroom right now. Edward counted out 20 gold pounds and stashed the rest back into the pouch. Based on the cost of living in the mysteries world, as long as he didn't splurge on luxury goods or extraordinary items, this amount would last him quite a while. Just to be safe, let's cast a Protega spell. Pressing down the brim of his hat, he stepped out of the alleyway. In an instant, the world before him opened up. At this moment, the city known as the City of Hope, Backland, unfolded before his eyes. Empress Borough, the Hall family's luxurious estate. Several members of the Church of the Evernight were questioning the maids about the events 3 days ago. However, all of them claimed that they had been too frightened at the time and couldn't remember what the criminal looked like. Father. Audrey entered the room, holding a piece of artwork in her hands. I heard you were going to create a wanted poster for the criminal. I have a very clear memory of his face, and I also happen to be skilled at drawing, so. She handed the painting to Earl Hall. I hope this helps. Excellent. Earl Hall unfolded the paper, his mustache twitching slightly as he examined the portrait. Then, he looked up at his daughter. Are you sure he looked like this? I'm sure, Father. The two exchanged glances for a few seconds. Then, Earl Hall handed the portrait to one of the red gloves. Since Audrey has already drawn the suspect's face, we can end the questioning here. The other methods you mentioned are no longer necessary. Understood, Lord Hall. We will do everything we can to catch him as soon as possible. The red gloves quickly took the portrait and left. Earl Hall sipped his red tea leisurely, then casually asked, Audrey, do you still wish to visit the Church of the Evernight to seek the goddess's blessing? Yes, Father. May I go out now? Then I'll go tomorrow. I'll return to my room now, thank you, Father. Neither of them said much, yet both understood each other perfectly. Audrey stepped out of the drawing room and let out a soft sigh. Susie, do you think what I did was wrong? Susie wagged her tail, her face full of innocence. Sherwood Borough, a cheap inn. Edward completed the check-in process and entered his cramped room, which was barely 10 square meters. The furnishings were simple. A wooden single bed, a worn-out desk, a chair with a broken leg, a coat rack, and a small stove. The window was tightly shut, probably to keep the dust in the air from getting inside. The reason he hadn't chosen a better place was simple. Whether it was a high-end hotel or a long-term rental, both required identification. And right now, he was an undocumented person. But I didn't come here for a vacation either. Edward removed his hat and took off his trench coat, hanging them neatly before sitting at the desk with a notebook in hand. This time, I have 3.5 objectives. First, to choose a suitable pathway for myself. Second, to obtain its formula. Third, to consume the potion. As for that remaining half, Edward bit the tip of his steel pen, a smile appearing on his face. That would be meeting our protagonist, the great fool, Klein. Anyone who had read Lord of the Mysteries would likely agree on one thing. Klein was undoubtedly a good person, in every sense of the word. Having someone like that as an ally was as reassuring as it could get. In the future, when he becomes a true pillar, Edward might even be able to ride along and secure an easy path to angelhood. But of course, that was a matter for later. He flipped to his previous notes. Based on my last round of analysis, my potential potion choices are hunter, lawyer, warrior, seer, and apprentice. But these are just my own preferences. In reality, if luck isn't on my side, I might not even come across any of them for months. Edward let out a long sigh. Sigh. I guess I'll start by checking what formulas I can find at a Beyonder gathering. Plans never keep up with changes anyway. Knock, knock, knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Who is it? Sir, I'm from the inn staff. We've just made a fresh batch of daisy pies, would you like to try some? Daisy pies. That was a well-known dish frequently mentioned in the original novel. Edward's eyes lit up as he eagerly strode over and pulled open the door, only to find no one outside. Huh. Before he could react, a small figure swiftly maneuvered past him, slipping into the room with agile footwork. In the next instant, a fist was swinging toward the back of Edward's head. Bang! The small but solid punch stopped just 10 centimeters away from Edward, blocked by an invisible shield. A moment later, the force of the attack was rebounded back with equal strength. A Beyonder. The intruder gasped in shock and immediately retreated. Stupefy. 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 Edward fired 3 consecutive stunning spells, but the small figure dodged each one. Then, with a sudden burst of strength, the intruder kicked off the ground and attempted to smash through the window. However, the leg of the nearby table twisted unnaturally, transforming into a chain that coiled around the person's right leg. Petrificus totalis. The full-body bind curse struck true, freezing the intruder in place. Edward shouted, "Who are you, and why did you attack me?" The small figure gritted his teeth, forcefully shaking off the effects of the body-binding curse. He pulled out a sharp 3-edged dagger, slashed through the chain around his leg, and hurled it toward Edward with full force before dashing toward the window. Arg! The next second, the intruder let out a pained cry as he crashed heavily onto the desk, then tumbled to the floor. The glass window, at some point, had turned into a solid iron plate. Incarcerus. Petrificus totalis. Expelliarmus. Oh no. I'm screwed. The intruder felt his entire body freeze, his limbs turning numb. He could no longer move a muscle. Edward snorted coldly. You think I can't do anything if you refuse to talk? Legilimens. Without hesitation, he cast the Legilimency spell. Just then, a translucent figure phased through the wall and grabbed the immobilized intruder. Door. In an instant, both of their figures blurred and faded into near invisibility, then vanished completely. Edward stood frozen in place. Quote. Was that Furs and Zio? Note: don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. And, 1 extra chapter for every 10 reviews. Oregon 70, Powestones. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK Creators Thoughts. 7 comments 0 vote. Chapter 13. Thrilling Game of Tarot. Damn it, why did they attack me? Edward was utterly baffled. He had only just left the Hall family's mansion, he hadn't even done anything yet. Wait. Zio's main job was mediating and arbitrating disputes among the lower and middle classes, but she also took on bounty tasks to earn gold pounds. Could it be that Earl Hall had already put a bounty on him? But wasn't Audrey supposed to help obscure the truth? Had she not had the chance to act yet? No, this place was no longer safe. Edward immediately erased all traces of his presence in the room, then apparated to a small alley he had passed earlier. He quickly cast a disillusionment charm over himself. He had tested the disillusionment charm with Audrey before. As long as spirit vision wasn't activated, even a sequence 9 like her wouldn't be able to see him. Back then, Susie had only noticed him because she first caught the scent of an unfamiliar person and then used spirit vision to confirm his presence. Moving swiftly through the crowd, Edward plucked a few hairs from a couple of random passers-by with unremarkable faces. He then ducked into a deserted alley, took out a fresh batch of polyjuice potion, dropped in the hair, and reluctantly drank it down. Ah! The ordinary people taste absolutely disgusting. When he stepped out again, his appearance had completely changed to that of a nondescript, forgettable face. Wandering aimlessly for several blocks, he finally reached an area near the Backland Bridge and found another cheap inn. By the time he was settled in, he was completely exhausted. As he collapsed onto the bed, he muttered to himself. If they can still track me down after all this, I might have no choice but to leave Backland. Furs and Zio's apartment. As soon as she got home, Furs flopped onto the plush sofa, letting out a lazy, contented sigh. Ah, nothing beats lying down. Zio, still sore all over from the earlier confrontation, frowned as she asked. Why were you even there? Furs, eyes closed, responded as if she were half asleep. I was out looking for inspiration and just happened to see you enter that inn, so I followed you in. Hey, you. out looking for inspiration. I, first tried to sit up and refute the accusation with righteous indignation, but after several failed attempts, she simply gave up and admitted. Fine, fine. I was avoiding my editor's demands for my manuscript. And also, I needed to buy cigarettes. If you don't submit your drafts soon, will you even have money for next quarter's rent? Don't worry, I'm almost done, almost done. Furs lit a cigarette with practiced elegance, taking a leisurely puff before lazily remarking. By the way, I did just save you back there. And all you're doing is nagging me. No, thank you. Zio clenched her fists, still furious. The client didn't provide any details about the target, and the bounty wasn't even that high. I just assumed it was an ordinary person. She gritted her teeth. I'm definitely going to settle this with him. Furs raised an eyebrow. Speaking of which, Viscount Glaint just contacted me. He wants us to arrange a meeting soon so he and Miss Audrey can attend a Beyonder gathering. Let's do it tomorrow, then. Just as she habitually reached for her triple-edged dagger, Zio suddenly froze. Shit, I left my dagger with that Beyonder back there. I heard that some of them can use personal belongings to track people. The two girls exchanged looks, the air between them growing heavy. After a long silence, Furs sighed and shrugged. Guess I was right not to worry about rent after all. A few seconds later, she added casually. Time to move. Cheap in. Edward never had any intention of tracking down Furs and Zio. After all, they had just fought. If he suddenly showed up at their door, they'd probably think he was there for revenge. Furs might even waste another stone of Traveler's bracelet on him. Forget it. I'll just get a good night's sleep first. The next day, fully rested, Edward woke up feeling refreshed. After washing up, he apparated to the designated meeting spot and found a letter hidden within a tree crevice. 2 p.m. The note only contained a time, but Edward immediately understood. Audrey was letting him know that she would be leaving the house at 2 p.m. to attend a Beyonder gathering. This was his cue to meet up with her when the opportunity arose. I remember Audrey's first extraordinary gathering was one arranged by Furs and Zio, hosted by Mr. A. Mr. A was one of the 22 oracles of the Aurora Order, a dangerously unhinged, mad beauty. In the early to mid stages of the original story, he was incredibly active and an extremely dangerous figure. But then again, Mr. A is more of a fanatic. Everything he does is in service of his god. As long as it doesn't involve his deity, he actually knows how to act with some restraint. It's best to keep a respectful distance and avoid provoking him. Back at the inn, Edward finally had the chance to try the famous daisy pie, something he had been looking forward to for a while. Unfortunately, perhaps due to the inn's mediocre culinary skills, the taste left him rather disappointed. Alongside the daisy pie were a few pieces of dessert and a cup of black tea. He took a small bite of everything before setting them aside. Even though he had transmigrated into a Brit's body, he had no fondness for baked beans and bland food. Rather, his taste buds still leaned towards his original preference. To him, the highest praise for a dessert was that it was not too sweet, but the ones in front of him were so cloyingly sugary that they made his teeth ache. He recalled that Klein had quite the sweet tooth. Since there was still plenty of time, Edward decided to head out and find something else to eat. The moment he stepped out of the inn, a small, scrawny child came limping toward him, pursued by a group of thuggish-looking men. They were clearly furious, their expressions menacing. Stop right there, you little brat. Edward hesitated for a brief moment before subtly waving the wand hidden in his sleeve. Instantly, the men seemed to crash into an invisible barrier, stumbling over each other in a tangled heap. The boy seized the opportunity to flee, disappearing into the crowd. Damn, if things like this happen even on the streets near Empress Borough, I can't even imagine the chaos in the slums. And they call this the land of hope. More frustratingly, this disorder was likely orchestrated by the King of Lowen himself to aid in his ascension to the Black Emperor. As a citizen under such a ruler, what sheer bad luck. Edward wandered through the streets, sampling all sorts of so-called authentic Lonis street food. By the end of his impromptu food tour, he had only one thought. Eat, 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 I'll just keep eating. No food of Backland is safe from my clutches, ha ha ha. When noon arrived, he found a cafe and settled in, deciding to stay there until the evening. Sir, here is your coffee and ice cream. Just as the waiter placed his order on the table, a small figure suddenly crawled out from beneath it. The boy stared longingly at the ice cream, gulping audibly, none other than the same limping child from earlier. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, dressed in tattered clothes, with a newspaper boy's cap perched on his head. Here, take it. Edward handed over the ice cream without hesitation. The boy's eyes lit up as he eagerly grabbed it and started licking away with delight. Edward, on the other hand, picked up a copy of the Daily Observer and flipped through it absent-mindedly. The newspaper focused primarily on local affairs and common people's issues, with some sections reading like short stories straight out of Story Club. Sir, the boy suddenly spoke up after finishing his ice cream. From somewhere, Edward wasn't sure where, he pulled out a deck of tarot cards. I happen to know a bit of tarot divination. Would you like to try, sir? Edward chuckled and reached out his hand. If Klein had been the one saying this, he might have been truly intrigued. But from a limping kid, this was probably nothing more than a child's game. Wait. His smile froze. A limping child. Loves ice cream. Tarot cards. Why did this combination of keywords seem oddly familiar? No way. Isn't this exactly like the plotline with that doctor in the original novel? Then that would mean this boy was, Will Osepton, the Snake of Mercury. Without hesitation, Edward retracted his hand. On second thought, maybe not. Quote question mark question mark question mark quote. The boy blinked, clearly confused. You don't trust me. It's not that. Edward shook his head, forcing a smile. I just think that fate is meant to be unpredictable. If I learn about the future in advance, wouldn't that make life a bit dull? The boy was taken aback for a moment before nodding slowly. You make a good point. All right, I have some matters to attend to. You can have this coffee if you want. Edward picked up his hat, gave the boy a polite nod, then turned and left the cafe. Good luck, sir, the boy called after him. He remained seated even after Edward had disappeared from view. A moment later, he murmured to himself in a dazed tone. Should I wait another 5 years, or follow the original fate? After leaving the cafe, Edward aimlessly wandered through several more streets before finally using apparition to teleport near the Hall family's mansion. That was way too damn scary. To be honest, Will Osepton hadn't exactly been portrayed as a villain in the original work. If Edward were just an ordinary transmigrator, he would have leapt at the opportunity to get close to such a powerful figure. But with his secret of transmigrating every 15 days, that was the kind of anomaly that would undoubtedly pique the interest of gods and angels alike. Someone like the Snake of Mercury. Best to stay as far away as possible. Good thing I ran when I did. Edward took off his hat and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Just then, a light piece of paper drifted out from the hat. On reflex, he caught it, only to instantly fling it away as if it had burned him. It was a paper crane. Chapter 14. The modest yet lavish life of the wealthy. At 2 p.m., a carriage departed from the Hall family's mansion, heading northward through the city before making its way toward St. Samuel Cathedral. Edward initially followed from a distance, but as soon as he saw the carriage heading toward the headquarters of the Church of the Evernight Goddess, he wisely chose not to continue trailing it. Instead, he positioned himself at a key intersection where the carriage would have to pass on its return journey. A few hours later, the carriage reappeared, heading back toward Empress Borough. However, this time, it did not take the same route home. Instead, it turned at an intersection and stopped in front of another luxurious mansion. Outside the mansion, carriages arrived one after another, and elegantly dressed young men and women entered in pairs. It seemed a noble ball was being held inside. Audrey stepped gracefully out of the carriage, dressed in an exquisite gown, assisted by her maid, Annie. A gentleman in a meticulously tailored suit greeted her with a polite air kiss on the back of her hand before escorting her inside. Trailing behind Audrey was Susie, who suddenly turned around and barked 3 times in rapid succession. Edward, having already changed his appearance, immediately understood the signal. He swiftly approached and cast a confundus charm to fool the doorman, slipping into the ball unnoticed. As expected, the moment he entered the courtyard, he saw Susie wagging her tail, waiting for him. Weaving through the lively crowd, Susie led him upstairs to a quiet bedroom. Once at the door, she barked twice more. The door soon opened, revealing Audrey, now dressed in a black hooded cloak. Her face lit up with a smile. Good evening, Edward. If not for Susie, I wouldn't have recognized you at all. Her tone was cheerful. Good evening. The moment Edward stepped into the room, his gaze landed on Annie, who was fast asleep on the bed. What happened to her? He asked. Audrey playfully twirled a white agate-like bone wand between her fingers. Just a sleeping charm, saves us a lot of trouble. With a light step, she retreated and pulled up her hood, allowing a thin black veil to conceal her beautiful features. You should put on a cloak too. Glaint is already waiting for us. Edward adjusted his cloak but couldn't help but ask, "Did your family put a bounty on me?" "Yesterday, not long after I checked into an inn, someone came knocking." "Huh." Audrey looked genuinely puzzled. "But I gave my father a completely different portrait of you." "That's strange." She suddenly covered her mouth in realization. "Could it have been my brother? Did he put out a bounty before my father even made a move?" "I'm so sorry, Edward." "It's fine," Edward reassured her. "I'll just avoid going out too much for a while. And when I do, I'll make sure to take some polyjuice potion first." "Let's go. Susie, watch over Annie, alright?" Woof. The two of them left the bedroom through a hidden passage and made their way downstairs to the side entrance of the Viscount's estate, where a carriage was already waiting. "Wow, your outfit is really, as Emperor Russell would say, very cool." Viscount Glaint, who was also dressed in a similar hooded cloak, couldn't help but admire Audrey's attire. "Thank you," Audrey said with a light curtsy, lifting her cloak slightly in an elegant gesture. "And this is?" Glaint's gaze shifted to Edward. "This is my good friend, Edward," Audrey introduced smoothly. "Like us, he is also an enthusiast of the mystical arts." "A pleasure to meet you." Glaint extended his hand, and Edward shook it briefly. The three of them boarded the carriage. Without hesitation, Audrey took a seat beside Edward, further piquing Glaint's curiosity about his identity. "Mr. Edward," he inquired casually, "may I ask, where do you hail from?" "Edward is from an ancient kingdom," Audrey answered on his behalf. "He only arrived in Backland recently." Even as she spoke, she couldn't help but think to herself, "Audrey, you've reached the point where you can lie without even blinking." "Oh." Glaint frowned slightly. "If that's the case, then how did Audrey come to know him?" "By the way," Audrey continued smoothly, "Edward currently doesn't have a place to stay. Could you help arrange something for him?" "Of course. I'd be happy to." Glaint proceeded to ask Edward about his preferences regarding the size, location, and furnishings of his residence. Though Edward repeatedly emphasized that he was fine with something simple since he lived alone, Audrey insisted otherwise. In the end, Glaint decided to find him a small, detached house with a garden in Empress Borough, one that would cost at least £2 a week in rent. "So this is what it's like to be rich, pretty damn nice." Glaint then brought up the topic of hiring a butler and servants, but Edward firmly refused. As a wizard, he could handle cleaning and organizing with just a few spells. He had no interest in surrounding himself with people who would constantly be watching him. About 10 minutes later, the carriage entered a secluded neighborhood and stopped in front of an unassuming house. Standing outside were two figures, one tall and one short. They were none other than Furs and Zio. Furs had slightly curled chestnut hair, and her light blue eyes carried a natural air of laziness. A cigarette rested between her long, slender fingers. Zio, on the other hand, was much shorter, barely over 150 centimeters. She had delicate, soft features, shoulder-length messy blonde hair, and was dressed in a traditional knight's training outfit. At first glance, her appearance seemed a bit mismatched, but the longer one looked, the more she exuded an oddly mature yet childlike charm. "Sorry for not notifying you in advance," Audrey said as they approached. "This is my friend Edward. He's also looking for an opportunity to step into the world of Beyonders." "Good evening, ladies." "Good evening." Since Edward had altered his appearance, neither Furs nor Zio recognized him. His plan was to reveal his identity after the gathering and finally get an answer from Zio about why she had attacked him back then. Without further conversation, Zio stepped forward and knocked on the wooden door, 3 long taps followed by 2 short ones. With a creak, the door slowly opened, revealing a dimly lit room filled with people sitting sporadically. Most wore wide robes with hoods or masks, concealing their features, while a few remained uncovered, not bothering to hide their identities. Audrey immediately switched into spectator mode. It had been quite a while since she last fully immersed herself in this state. The presence of Edward had interrupted her usual observations, yet oddly enough, she now felt as though she had digested a large portion of her potion. "It seems we have a new guest today." The voice came from a man seated on a single-person sofa. He wore a black robe and a hood that shrouded his face in shadow. His gaze, calm yet oppressive, swept over the newcomers from a position of superiority. The moment Audrey met his eyes, goosebumps ran down her arms. "I really don't like the way this man looks at people." Edward instinctively stepped forward, blocking her from Mr. A's line of sight. He removed his hat and offered a slight bow. "That's Mr. A," Furs whispered. "A powerful Beyonder and the host of tonight's secret gathering." Audrey unconsciously compared him to the fool, but immediately dismissed the thought. The fool is a great existence on the level of a deity. How could some mere Mr. A even be mentioned in the same breath? She could attend a gathering hosted by such a great being every week. How wonderful. At the next tarot club meeting, she must ask the fool if Edward could join as well. Noticing Audrey's disregard for Mr. A, Zio solemnly warned, many Sequence 8s, and even some Sequence 7 Beyonders, have tried to target A, but in the end, they all vanished without a trace. As they conversed, the four of them entered the house, and the doorman immediately shut the door behind them. After adjusting to the dim gaslight inside, Zio led them to two large blackboards standing upright, both filled with handwritten requests from the gathering's members. These are the needs of the members. As you can imagine, many people prefer to keep their possessions secret to avoid being targeted by greedy individuals. So instead, they write anonymously about what they wish to buy or sell, along with general pricing and item details. Audrey quickly scanned the board, internally marveling at how cheap everything seemed. Unfortunately, aside from 3 pages of Emperor Russell's notes, there was nothing she particularly needed. Thinking about how she could now learn what these notes contained from Edward before handing them over to the fool, she became even more excited. Tugging at Edward's sleeve, she pulled him closer and asked, "There's a Sequence 8 feet Sheriff potion formula here. Do you need it?" Sheriff belonged to the Arbiter pathway. The person who needed it the most here was likely Zio. Edward shook his head and took a small sip of polyjuice potion before whispering, "I'm looking for formulas for hunter, lawyer, warrior, seer, and apprentice. All of them. Whichever one I come across first, I'll take. I haven't decided which pathway to follow yet." That works. They're not too expensive anyway. At the side, Furs was experiencing an existential crisis, so this was what it meant to be rich. Even if she wrote non-stop for an entire year, she wouldn't be able to earn a few hundred gold pounds. And besides, on cloudy days, she had to rest. On rainy days, she had to rest. If the fog was too thick, she had to rest. And when a rare sunny day came, she had to rest even more, so how could she possibly write for an entire year? Wait a minute, did he just say he wanted the apprentice formula? Zio, however, wasn't overthinking it. She leaned in close to Audrey and whispered, "Is there anything you want?" "For now, just Emperor Russell's notes. I admire him. I believe the unique runes, or rather, characters, he created contain mystical power. We just haven't discovered the right way to combine them yet." As Audrey spoke, she sneaked a glance at Edward. Sure enough, she saw him raising an eyebrow at her as if to say, "You're getting better at the art of shamelessness. Atta girl." She puffed up her cheeks and glared back at him. At that moment, a young man in a white shirt and black vest sitting nearby suddenly became excited. "Yes. Exactly. I've finally found someone who shares my view. I'm the owner of those 3 pages of notes. I can sell them to you right now." Audrey was momentarily stunned but then responded with a smile, "Then allow me to express my gratitude." After obtaining the 3 pages, she carefully examined them, as if verifying their authenticity. The young man immediately protested, "I still want to live. How could I dare sell fake goods at Mr. A's gathering?" Zio flexed her fingers, eager to try something. "If there really is an issue, I can help you arbitrate it privately." "Thank you." Audrey re-entered her spectator state, though Mr. A's aggressive gaze made her incredibly uncomfortable. Just then, one of A's attendants approached them and said in a low voice, "You may write your requests on paper and hand them to me. During the break, you may also use the side rooms to write down the items you wish to sell on the board." After a brief exchange, everyone handed in their written requests. Audrey asked for another spectator formula, Viscount Glaint requested the apothecary formula, and Edward wrote down all the formulas he wanted. Zio clearly desired the sheriff formula but unfortunately had no money. Seeking spectator and telepathist potion formulas. Price negotiable in person. Looking to purchase apothecary potion formula at a high price. Seeking hunter and lawyer potion formulas. Looking to purchase seer potion formula. After the attendant read out all the requests, another one came over holding a stack of papers. First, he handed one to Audrey. Then, to the surprise of everyone present, he dumped 6 or 7 sheets into Edward's hands. "I have the lawyer formula. Hunter formula, minimum 300 gold pounds. Seer formula plus all required materials, package deal for 900 gold pounds. I have the warrior formula. Let's discuss in person. I have the formula and the materials you need. Apprentice formula, won't sell for less than 400 gold pounds. Note, if you guys want to read 40 chapters in advance of the current story, you can support me on my Patreon. Trust me, it's awesome. Link Patreon.com IseeBLACK. Remove the brackets. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 12 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 15. Win-win situation. Edward was stunned. Wasn't potion formula supposed to be rare and hard to come by? Then why did it seem like whatever he wanted just fell right into his hands? What kind of ridiculous luck was this? Wait, luck. Suddenly, he recalled the last words that the limping boy had said to him. Good luck, sir. Could it be that the boy had somehow bestowed good fortune upon him? What's wrong? After politely declining Mr. A's kind offer of other potion formulas, Audrey curiously leaned in. Here. Your luck is way too good. Audrey could no longer maintain her spectator state. At the same time, a strong sense of vigilance rose within her. Such exaggerated good luck was absolutely abnormal in the world of mysticism. Her expression turned serious as she began considering how she could seek the fool's help later. My suggestion is to ignore them and leave as soon as the gathering ends. But, if this really was luck bestowed by the Snake of Mercury, wouldn't it be a waste to just walk away? Had he known this would happen, he might as well have asked directly which pathway he should choose. Should he find an excuse to go to the restroom and use the paper crane to ask? That crane had been sitting in his pocket for ages. He had debated over whether to keep it or not and ultimately decided to hold on to it. After all, he still didn't know why Will Ossepton had taken an interest in him. Keeping the crane at least ensured the possibility of future communication. Meanwhile, Viscount Glaint, who had been waiting in vain for someone to trade with him, was feeling rather disappointed. But then, he turned his head and saw Audrey whispering closely with Edward. A close friend like this wouldn't just appear out of nowhere. Did Audrey find him outside? Hiss. She even arranged for him to stay in a house several kilometers away. Is it for convenience? Does Earl Hall even know about this? This is simply unbelievable. His gossipy instincts flared up, and his mind immediately conjured up all sorts of scandalous and melodramatic stories. But in the end, all his thoughts condensed into one sentence. Oh, poor Earl Hall. On the other side, Edward had already made up his mind. He didn't have time to wait around. He had to seize this opportunity. If I don't have enough money, I might need to borrow some from you, he said, feeling a little awkward. Consider it payment for teaching me English and magic, Audrey replied casually. Since Edward had already decided, she didn't press further. Instead, she heightened her vigilance, fully immersing herself in her spectator state, keenly observing everyone's every move. Don't even mention it. In your world, Beyonders have way too much resistance to magic. I can't even knock Susie down, it's so frustrating. Magic isn't just for combat. Many spells are incredibly useful and convenient. Over the next hour, Edward met with 4 different individuals one-on-one, negotiating fiercely. In the end, he successfully acquired the formulas for Hunter and Lawyer, as well as both the formula and materials for Warrior and Seer. Just as he was about to meet with the person selling the apprentice formula, Furs approached him. Actually, I have the apprentice formula too, she admitted, lightly brushing a strand of her wavy hair behind her ear, still somewhat hesitant. As for the ingredients, I still have some auxiliary materials left over from before. I also know where to buy the main ingredients, so. Edward immediately understood. Got it. I'll come find you after the gathering ends. I know this is asking a lot, but, could you lend me 450 gold pounds in advance? Don't worry, I'll hand over the formula and the materials as soon as we get back. And I'll sell it to you for less than anyone else would. Deal. Since he was going to buy it anyway, of course, he'd go for the cheaper option. Even though Furs was a notorious slacker, her reliability wasn't in question. In less than one night, the 2,000 gold pounds Audrey had given him were completely spent. Edward had successfully transformed from a wealthy man into a pauper, as if he had just ridden a financial roller coaster. Fortunately, he didn't feel too much about it. He had never experienced the struggle of scraping together pennies like Klein had. At least these formulas and the materials I don't need can still be resold for money. Half an hour later, the gathering finally came to an end, and people began to leave one after another. Just as Edward reached the door, one of Mr. A's attendants approached him and handed him another slip of paper. This is a gift from Mr. A. He hopes to see you again next time. Unfolding the note, Edward's eyes widened slightly. It was the formula for secret supplicant. Great. Edward rubbed his temples. Collecting multiple formulas at once had definitely caught A's attention. No, more accurately, it had caught everyone's attention. Would he be targeted after this? As soon as he stepped outside, he voiced his concerns to the group. Zio and Furs, who had originally planned to leave separately, immediately changed their minds. We'll go back with you. On the way back, everyone remained extremely cautious, but thankfully, the journey was smooth and uneventful. Upon returning to Viscount Glaint's villa, Edward left with Furs and Zio. Audrey had originally intended to go with them, but Glaint blocked her way with the excuse, "It's too late, the Earl will be worried." Internally, he was muttering to himself, "My dear cousin, the Earl knows you're at my place, but if I stand by and watch as you stay out all night with a man, who knows if he'll take it out on me." Near Backland Bridge. This was the new apartment Furs and Zio had just rented yesterday. As soon as they stepped inside, Furs casually handed Zio a slip of paper, as if she were offering a cigarette. "Here, it's for you." Zio took the note in confusion, but the moment she read it, she jumped up in shock. Though, unfortunately, she still wasn't as tall as Furs. You bought it. You've been an arbiter for almost a year now. You should be able to advance to sheriff soon. If you miss this chance, who knows how long you'll have to wait." Zio was both excited and anxious. "But, the money is a loan, make sure you earn it back and pay me." Zio immediately clenched her small fists, psyching herself up. "I'll pay you back as soon as I collect the bounty on that guy at the inn." Edward. Cough, cough. He cleared his throat twice. Furs quickly went to the table, picked up a pen and paper, and said apologetically, "Right, I'll write down the formula for you now. Is there a washroom?" Since leaving the gathering, Edward hadn't taken any more polyjuice potion. By now, the effect was about to wear off, so he needed to go to the bathroom to pretend to remove his disguise. "To be honest, I was in disguise when I attended the gathering," he admitted. "After spending the evening together, I think we can be considered friends now. And friends shouldn't keep secrets from each other." That statement was half true. Making friends was genuine. But revealing his true appearance had two purposes. One was to find out who had put a bounty on him, and the other was simply that he didn't have enough polyjuice potion to maintain this face indefinitely. In the wizarding world, there were three main ways to change one's appearance. The most common was polyjuice potion, but it was difficult to brew and time-consuming to prepare. The second method was being a metamorphagus, but that was an innate ability. The third and most difficult method was using transfiguration to alter one's appearance. However, that required an extremely high level of mastery, and as far as Edward knew, only Gellert Grindelwald had ever achieved it. By the way, Edward added before heading inside, "No matter what you see in a moment, don't act impulsively." Furs was confused. What does he mean by that? Maybe he's so ugly it makes people want to throw up, Zio speculated. A few minutes later, Edward stepped out of the washroom. "You're so young." Furs had barely finished her thought when Zio, without hesitation, grabbed the nearest chair and hurled it at him. However, before the chair could hit him, it transformed into a venomous snake, coiling around her wrist and flicking its tongue at her. Shocked, Zio instinctively let go, flinging the snake away. But the next second, she was already looking around for another weapon. "Stop, stop, stop. I already told you, don't act impulsively." Furs was still trying to make sense of the situation. "What's going on, Zio?" Zio stepped in front of Furs, her eyes fixed warily on Edward. "He's the guy from the inn." Edward raised both hands. "If I really wanted revenge, I had countless chances to attack you both earlier, didn't I? And even if you don't trust me, you should at least trust Audrey, right?" The two women exchanged glances but didn't lower their guard. Zio said coldly, "How do I know you won't kill us to silence us after revealing your true face?" Edward chuckled. "How do you know this face is even real?" He turned to Zio with a smirk. "Miss Zio, I simply want to know who's trying to target me. If you're willing, I'd appreciate it if you could tell me. I only received the arbitration request at a pub. The client claimed you had committed serious offenses and wanted you captured as soon as possible," Zio explained. Edward thought for a moment before asking, "Is there any way to find out who issued the request?" They were anonymous, unless, Zio's eyes suddenly lit up. "If I turn you in. Quote. Zio's expression was completely serious. "Think about it, if you let me hand you over, I get the bounty, and you find out who wants to capture you. It's a win-win situation." Edward rolled his eyes. Oh, sure, I sell myself, and you get all the money. Win-win. More like you win twice. Zio scratched her messy hair and reconsidered. All right then, how about we split the bounty 50-50? Note: don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 16. First encounter. Quote. Furs lightly knocked on Zio's head. The gold pounds for your sheriff potion were advanced by Mr. Edward. Stop thinking about scamming him. She turned to Edward and gave him an apologetic bow. Mr. Edward, I apologize on behalf of Zio. It's fine. I didn't lose anything, after all. Besides, when I'm strong enough one day, I might actually consider trying Zio's plan, Edward sighed casually. Then, he took out a triblated dagger and handed it back to her. Here, this is yours. Zio took it back, then asked curiously, haven't you already taken some kind of potion and gained Beyander abilities? Why do you still need to buy formulas? They're for some friends of mine. Otherwise, why would I be buying so many at once? Furs and Zio suddenly understood. That explanation made much more sense. Before long, Edward had obtained the apprentice potion formula along with some auxiliary ingredients. After arranging to return in 2 days for the main ingredients, he bid them farewell. Only after he left did Furs let out a long sigh of relief. She flopped onto the sofa, exhausted. Ah, I'm so tired, this sofa is way too hard. I really miss my old one. Just then, Zio's expression turned serious. Furs, you don't seriously believe everything that guy just said, do you? You were the one who. Furs was stunned at first, then suddenly gasped. Wait, were you faking it just now? Zio gave her a look of utter disappointment. I've told you so many times, the Beyander world is dangerous. The more easily you trust people, the worse your end will be. But, what could he possibly want from the two of us? My daily 100-word writing habit, or your 1.5 meter height. Quote. Wait. Furs suddenly sat up in alarm. Did we just move for nothing? My deposit money. Cheap in, Sherwood Borough. Edward sat on the bed, hesitating as he held the paper crane in his hands. If I just write on it directly, wouldn't that be too obvious? I have no reason to know about this thing in the first place. He recalled that in the original novel, after the doctor received the paper crane, he was able to meet him in a dream. Maybe I should try that too. Placing the paper crane on his pillow, Edward lay down and attempted to sleep. Unfortunately, without a dream incantation, the more he tried, the more awake he became. In the end, he had to take a sip of dreamless sleep potion before he finally drifted off. His last thought before losing consciousness was, I wonder, will dreamless sleep potion make me actually dreamless? Endless darkness slowly faded away, and Edward found himself standing in a desolate plain. The ground beneath him was made of pitch-black stone, completely devoid of grass or vegetation. In the center of this wasteland stood a black spire, towering ominously. Wrapped around it was a massive silver-white serpent, a creature so large that its body coiled around the tower multiple times. The serpent had no physical scales, only an intricate array of patterns and symbols etched across its body. These markings interlocked to form a series of rotating wheels, and around each wheel were unique, unknown sigils. So this is the Snake of Mercury. Edward quickly realized something. Unlike the doctor from the original story, who had been in a dreamlike trance, his own consciousness was completely clear. Is this Will Ossepton's special treatment for me? He raised his head, gazing up at the towering black spire. What should I say when I go inside? Should I just ask directly which pathway to choose? At that moment, the silver-white serpent suddenly moved. It coiled itself into a tighter spiral, and its ruby-red eyes locked onto Edward with a gaze devoid of emotion. Then, in a voice that was neither male nor female, it spoke. Apologies. I cannot help you make a choice. Perhaps, you should ask someone else. Ask who? Crack. The dream shattered. Edward awoke in his bed, the morning light filtering through the window. Get lost, riddle-spewing cryptic entities. He grumbled as he rubbed his temples, his eyes drifting toward the paper crane. Then, almost unconsciously, he muttered. Who exactly am I supposed to ask? 2 days later, Edward successfully obtained the final main ingredient for the apprentice potion. Meanwhile, Viscount Glaint had helped him rent a small villa on the edge of the Empress Borough. Because it was in a remote location, the price was relatively cheaper. The surrounding houses were also unoccupied, making it a rather discreet choice. Although it was called a small villa, that was only in comparison to true mansions. The house itself had 2 floors, totaling over 200 square meters, and if the garden was included, the total area approached 400 square meters. By any standard, it was a luxurious residence. The weekly rent was 3 gold pounds, meaning the annual rent came to 162 gold pounds. For an ordinary person, that would be an astronomical sum. But for Edward, who had just spent 2,000 gold pounds, it barely registered. Standing inside the spacious, empty house, Edward took a deep breath. Am I really about to start living the shameless life of a rich lady who only eats, sleeps, and spends money? No. Edward, you are someone who can travel between 2 worlds. How could he allow himself to become complacent? I need to make money. I need to become independent. Just then, Susie trotted into the villa, her fluffy tail wagging. She carried a cloth pouch in her mouth and set it on the floor. Then, vibrating the air around her, she spoke. There are 1,000 gold pounds inside. Audrey asked me to deliver it to you. Quote, quote. Edward struggled for 3 seconds. Then, he gave up. Fine. If I have to be shameless, then so be it. As he resigned himself to his fate, Susie continued. Audrey also said that her home is safe now. You can go visit her anytime, using the method that only you 2 know. Got it. Thanks, Susie. Satisfied, Susie picked up a piece of dried chicken meat and trotted happily away. Edward, meanwhile, understood Audrey's message very clearly. The method only they knew was apparition. By sending this message specifically through Susie, Audrey was making one thing clear. She had something important to discuss. Crackle. Edward's figure twisted and warped before appearing in Audrey's new room. Audrey was sitting upright on the sofa, clearly having waited for some time. Today, she wore a relatively simple light blue dress and a soft hat with a ribbon tied around her fair neck, giving her a rather adorable appearance. You're here. She eagerly pulled out the 3 pages of Emperor Russell's diary, her emerald green eyes sparkling. Hurry and take a look at what these pages say. Next time I visit, I must learn this language. By then, even the great fool would have no advantage over her. Sorry, Joe Mingrui. Edward didn't forget to cast a muggle-repelling charm around the room before quickly scanning through the diary pages. November 3rd, Matilda is 3 months pregnant. November 8th, Archbishop Van Esten came to me for help. November 9th, so there are such secrets hidden within the sequence pathways. April 9th, the Church of Eternal Blazing Sun, the Church of the Lord of Storms, and the Church of Knowledge and Wisdom have a hostile relationship, constantly at odds. Meanwhile, the Church of Evernight Goddess and Church of the God of Combat of the Faesac Empire are also irreconcilable enemies. April 13th, I attended that ancient gathering. Edward recognized these diary pages from the original novel. He pondered for a moment before explaining, these 3 pages should be records from 2 different periods. The first 2 pages mention Russell's daily life, but there's also an important piece of information. Once someone reaches sequence 5, they can switch to 1 or 2 corresponding sequence pathways. For example, the Sleepless Pathway and the Corpse Collector Pathway. The Mystery Prior Pathway and the Savant Pathway. Audrey was shocked. You can switch pathways. This contradicted the common knowledge she had previously learned. But the diary also says it's only possible for specific pathways. And if you take the wrong potion, even if you survive, you'll at best end up half insane and will never be able to advance further. Edward pulled out the last page. This page mentions the hostile relationships between the major churches, the Church of Eternal Blazing Sun, the Church of the Lord of Storms, and the Church of Knowledge and Wisdom all despise one another, while the Church of Evernight Goddess and Church of the God of Combat are outright enemies. Why is that? No idea. Edward shrugged. And then there's Russell's note about attending an ancient gathering. The attendees were all legendary figures, and what's more, that gathering possessed an object on par with a god. But I'm not sure if telling you more would bring some kind of danger. Just knowing this much should be enough. My God, what was that gathering? Audrey covered her mouth in astonishment, already wondering, could the Tarot Club someday reach that level? It doesn't say. That's all the useful information. Edward reflected for a moment. Whether it was the church conflicts or the ancient gathering, his memory of these events was incomplete, which meant they were details so dangerous that simply knowing them could be risky. Audrey sighed in disappointment, resting her chin on her hand. It's like I learned something, but at the same time, I know nothing. Well, it's only 3 pages. True. She quickly regained her lively demeanor. Edward, have you decided on your pathway yet? Not yet. The problem is, I don't know what criteria I should use to make my choice. Edward joked, maybe I'll just draw lots. In a way, that'd be like letting a deity choose for me. Audrey immediately grew serious. Or it could be an evil god misleading you. If you truly want a divine choice, you should seek a great and righteous god, like the Evernight goddess. And the fool, she added silently in her heart. At that moment, Edward had a revelation. You're right. I can ask a god for guidance. Ah, you're really going to the Church of Evernight. No, I have a better option. He smiled. He had a strong suspicion about who the someone else the Mercury Snake had referred to was. I'm going to Tingen City. Sunday afternoon. Klein didn't head straight to the Blackthorn Security Company. Instead, he planned to spend 2 hours at the Divination Club. He could feel that he was very close to fully digesting the seer potion. Over the past few weeks, his reputation in the divination industry had been growing. Sometimes, he would receive more than a dozen clients in a single afternoon, and despite only coming twice a week, his income was still quite good. Ah, but I regret talking too big when I first started, Klein sighed to himself. I built up my reputation too perfectly, and now I can't just raise my divination fees whenever I want. Just after sending off Elizabeth, who seemed to be haunted by a ghost, Klein prepared to leave for Blackthorn when the club's receptionist, the elegant Angelica, knocked on his door. Mr. Moretti, another client has requested a divination. Klein picked up his silk top hat. Apologies, but I have urgent business to attend to. Perhaps another time. This client seems quite generous. Klein chuckled. You know I don't place too much value on money. Otherwise, I wouldn't have set my prices so low. Please convey my apologies to them. Angelica pulled out a banknote. They gave me a 1 gold pound tip. She deliberately emphasized the words, 1 gold pound. Cough cough. Silently, Klein placed his hat back down. With a warm and professional smile, he said, which room does the client prefer? Note: don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK Creators Thoughts. 19 comments 0 vote. Chapter 17. First Act. He's already here. The one who stepped into the divination room was a boy dressed in a gray trench coat and a white shirt, with a black silk top hat on his head. Though he was a tad taller than Klein, his face still carried a trace of youthful innocence. However, there was an inexplicable maturity in his eyes. Edward removed his hat and gave a slight bow. Good day, Mr. Moretti. I'm a traveler from Backland, and I've long heard of your great reputation. Klein joked, I wasn't aware that my name had reached all the way to Backland. Miss Angelica, could you please bring a cup of Edward? All right, please bring Mr. Edward a cup of Therma coffee. Klein gestured for Edward to take a seat. It's a high-quality brew from the Paws Valley, bitter and refreshing. I'm not sure if it's to your taste. I'm fine with anything. To be honest, I actually know another Edward at the Divination Club. He's a diviner as well. As Klein tapped his left teeth twice, his spiritual vision activated. He observed that Edward's overall aura was pure white, indicating that he was in excellent health and hadn't attracted anything malicious. So, Mr. Edward, what kind of divination would you like? Career. Love. Edward stroked his chin in thought. I suppose it would fall under career since this decision directly determines the course of my future. And which divination method would you prefer? Astrology, crystal ball, or tarot? I'm fairly proficient in all of them. Edward pointed at the yellow crystal pendant tucked into Klein's left sleeve. Let's use that. Klein had no objections. All right. What exactly would you like me to divine? Well, Edward began, some time ago, I accidentally rescued a mysterious, injured individual. After recovering, this person said that, as a token of gratitude, they could guide me into the mystical world and make me a Beander. Klein instantly tensed up. You believed them? I had no choice but to believe it. After all, they demonstrated some abilities that I simply couldn't understand. May I continue? Please, go on. This person also told me that different types of Beander possess different abilities, just as chefs and blacksmiths each have their own specialized skills. However, I can only choose one pathway, and once I make my choice, I can never change it. They gave me these options: hunter, lawyer, warrior, seer, and apprentice. Edward placed several slips of paper with the pathway names written on them onto the table. However, he soon noticed that he had taken out one extra slip, one given to him by Mr. A, listing the secret supplicant formula. This one doesn't count. Though Edward swiftly put the slip away, Klein had already caught sight of its contents. Secret supplicant. Alarm bells rang in his mind. According to the Evernight Church's records, this was the exclusive pathway of the suspected heretical organization, the Aurora Order. Most people on this path were lunatics. Should I report this to the captain? Klein suppressed his urge to act rashly and instead asked, did this person say anything about you needing to join an organization or perform any kind of ritual? No, he only urged me to make my decision as soon as possible. He doesn't like owing favors. Edward sighed. Honestly, I'd rather he had just given me a single option, that way, I wouldn't have to agonize over my choice. But instead, he gave me 6 and repeatedly emphasized how important the decision was. I've been struggling with this for 3 days and nights. Saying this, Edward pulled out a 10-pound banknote and placed it on the table. This is for the divination fee. If it's not enough, I can add more. Klein suddenly felt his throat go dry. He picked up his coffee and took a small sip before responding. So, you want me to divine which one you should choose? Exactly. Klein rubbed his temples, hesitating for a while before finally sighing. Mr. Edward, I really want to help you, but when performing a divination, I need to phrase the question as clearly and simply as possible. Moreover, I can't use a question to seek an unknown outcome. For example, if I were to divine, which profession is most suitable for Edward? It would yield no result. Edward picked up one of the slips of paper and smiled. That's easy. You just take one slip at a time and use affirmative statements for each divination. Like, Edward is suited for the apprentice pathway. Klein was momentarily stunned. Wait, I can do that. Why not? I suppose that is a different approach, it feels like exploiting a bug. Cough cough. I mean, it's a creative method. Alright, let's give it a try. Klein held the silver chain in his left hand and let the yellow crystal pendant dangle just above the slip of paper labeled Hunter. It hovered just slightly above the surface. Then, he half-closed his eyes and silently repeated in his mind. Edward choosing the Hunter pathway is the correct choice. Edward choosing the Hunter pathway is the correct choice. Edward choosing the Hunter pathway is the correct choice. Edward watched the yellow crystal with great interest as it slowly began to spin counterclockwise. It rotated faster and faster until it became nothing more than a blur. Klein abruptly grasped the crystal, his expression filled with shock. The reaction was so intense. If Edward were to drink the Hunter potion, he would likely lose control on the spot. Mr. Moretti, what does this mean? Edward asked, though he already had a vague idea. You are not suited for the Hunter pathway. Klein moved the yellow crystal over the slip of paper labeled lawyer and began another divination. Edward choosing the lawyer pathway is the correct choice. Edward choosing the lawyer pathway is the correct choice. After repeating the phrase 7 times, the yellow crystal once again spun counterclockwise at an alarming speed. This one is also a no. He continued the process for warrior, seer, and apprentice, but each time, the results were exactly the same. Not this one. Not this one either. And, this one isn't right either. The smile on Edward's face gradually faded, and doubt crept into his heart. Am I simply unfit to become a Beander? Or did I just happen to pick the wrong pathways? Klein, however, had calmed down. Having experienced numerous supernatural events, he instinctively felt that something was off. He rubbed his temples lightly. Someone interfered with the divination. Was it the person who gave Edward the potion formula? But why? What is their goal? A thought suddenly struck him, and he turned to Edward. Could you let me test the slip you put away earlier? This one. Edward took out the secret supplicant formula. This one definitely isn't suitable. I've heard that people on this pathway are all Lanat. Before he could finish, the yellow crystal, suspended over the formula, began spinning clockwise. Something's wrong. Edward immediately understood. Someone was tampering with the divination results. The culprit was obvious. If it wasn't Mr. A himself, then it was someone connected to him. In fact, he now suspected that his accidental reveal of the secret supplicant formula earlier hadn't been a coincidence either. But how did they know I would use divination to choose a pathway? At that moment, Klein smiled faintly. I understand what's happening now. Please wait here for a moment, I need to visit the washroom. Is he finally going to divine in his divine kingdom, above the gray fog? This was exactly why Edward had sought him out. If Klein had stubbornly refused to go, Edward had planned to bombard him with gold pounds, insisting that he perform the divination repeatedly until he had to enter the grey fog. But now, he could save himself a hefty sum. Still, Edward maintained a friendly expression and asked with apparent concern, "Mr. Moretti, I've heard that you often visit the washroom when divining. Do you have some kind of medical condition? I happen to know an old doctor who specializes in male health issues." Klein stumbled mid-step and squeezed out through gritted teeth, "No need. I am perfectly healthy." Edward couldn't help but chuckle. Teasing the future Lord of the Mysteries was indeed quite amusing. On the other side, Klein entered the washroom, locked the door, and took 4 counterclockwise steps within his spiritual wall, ascending above the grey fog. Inside the vast and ancient Palace of Silence, he picked up the yellow crystal pendant and wrote a divination statement on the manifested parchment. "Performing a divination for Mr. Edward will be harmful to me." He set down the pen, untied the spiritual pendulum from his wrist, and held it firmly in his left hand, letting the yellow crystal dangle just above the parchment. "Performing a divination for Mr. Edward will be harmful to me. Performing a divination for Mr. Edward will be harmful to me." After chanting the statement 7 times, the yellow crystal began to spin counterclockwise. Klein raised an eyebrow. "Not only is it harmless, but it's actually beneficial. Oh, right, he did give me gold pounds." Reassured, he proceeded with the real divination. He wrote, "Edward choosing the hunter pathway as the correct choice." Repeating the phrase 7 times, his gaze deepened, but the pendulum remained completely still. A failed divination. No, this likely means that there is no definitive right or wrong answer for Edward choosing the hunter pathway. This makes sense. He then tested. Edward choosing the lawyer pathway as the correct choice. The pendulum spun counterclockwise slightly, indicating that the lawyer pathway was not a good fit for Edward. Next, he tested the seer pathway. No movement. For the apprentice pathway, the pendulum spun clockwise slightly, suggesting a degree of compatibility. Finally, Klein placed the yellow crystal over the parchment with the words, "Edward choosing the secret supplicant pathway as the correct choice." The moment he began the divination, the pendulum spun counterclockwise at an astonishing speed. Even faster than when he had tested the other pathways outside. Just as I suspected. Note: don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 18. Responsibility. Inside the red agate room. Edward finished his cup of coffee just as Klein finally returned. "Apologies, I must have eaten something bad yesterday. Sorry to keep you waiting." Klein sat back down, a confident smile on his face. "But while I was in the washroom, I performed another divination. If you trust my judgment." He tapped his finger on the apprentice slip. "This pathway might suit you better." "I trust you." Edward responded firmly and without hesitation. Klein was momentarily stunned. "Didn't you just display severe decision-making anxiety?" He had prepared a whole list of justifications, expecting Edward to be reluctant and indecisive. But now, the guy accepted it instantly. "Oh, Mr. Moretti, I really must thank you." Edward stood up and grabbed Klein's hand in gratitude. "Otherwise, I might have agonized over this for another 10 days or half a month, only to end up choosing a pathway completely unsuitable for me." Then, he pulled out a 10-pound note and handed it over. A small token of appreciation. You're too kind." Klein wasn't used to this level of enthusiasm, but he quickly drowned in the joy of earning another 10 pounds. Being a diviner was truly a profitable profession. Edward put on his hat, took a step back, and politely saluted, preparing to leave. At that moment, Angelica arrived again, an apologetic expression on her face. "Sorry to interrupt again, Mr. Moretti. Another visitor is here for you, Miss Megos." Edward instinctively glanced toward the reception area. There stood a girl with golden hair, wearing a ruffled bonnet. Her complexion was unhealthy pale white, and her slender fingers absent-mindedly caressed her slightly bulging abdomen as she muttered something under her breath. Sensing Edward's gaze, the girl looked up at him. Her lost and dazed expression suddenly turned to excitement. "Is it you?" She stared straight at Edward, murmuring the question like a sleepwalker. In that instant, Edward felt as if he had become a frog caught in the stare of a venomous snake. Terror consumed him, yet his legs refused to move. "Is it you?" She stepped closer, her voice rising slightly. "Not me, not me." Edward screamed in his heart, yet his mouth refused to utter a single word. Despair. Horror. A chill that seeped into his bones. At this moment, he finally understood how Klein had felt in the original story. Mr. Edward, what's wrong? Klein stepped out and gave him a puzzled pat on the shoulder. Edward's body trembled violently, snapping him out of the trance. He immediately turned and bolted in the opposite direction. I'm going home. You, be careful. Before Klein could react, Edward sprinted away. Once he reached a place where no one could see him, he vanished away with a soft crack. That way leads away from the exit. Klein muttered in confusion before turning to Megos. I'm sorry, Miss Megos, but I still have no leads on Lavinus. Megos didn't even look at him. She kept staring in the direction Edward had fled, her expression becoming lost once more. Gone. She gently stroked her belly. All right, let's go home. Muttering to herself, she turned and walked away. Klein was left completely bewildered. What the hell just happened? Outskirts of Tingen City. Edward suddenly materialized out of thin air. He stumbled forward, nearly falling to the ground. That scared the hell out of me. He hurriedly pulled out the secret supplicant formula, tore it into pieces, then incinerated the fragments into ashes and scattered them in the wind. Without stopping, he teleported multiple times in quick succession, only relaxing once he reached his villa in the Empress Borough. That was too close, I was almost done for. Collapsing onto the sofa, he grabbed a teapot, flipped open the lid, and chugged the liquid down. His frantic thoughts gradually settled. Megos, the vessel of the true creator's descent. The first boss-level enemy Klein faced in the original novel, but why did she seek me out? This must be connected to Mr. A. No, he shouldn't have that much power. Could it be that the evil god has discovered my true identity? Edward's breath hitched. As an outsider intruding into this world, and with his current weak strength, he had long prepared himself for the possibility that the gods of this world might discover him. But now that it had actually happened, an overwhelming sense of despair and helplessness crashed down on him. Please, let this just be my overthinking. Let Megos have been drawn to me by something else, like the Snake of Mercury. He froze for a moment. Wait, what if the Snake of Mercury also already knows I'm an outsider? A horrifying realization hit him. It felt as if he had been running naked in broad daylight under the watchful eyes of powerful beings. Quickly, he smacked his forehead multiple times, forcing himself to stop overthinking. No use dwelling on this. Right now, my priority is to consume the potion and become a Beander. That being said, Edward didn't rush it. Instead, he first went out for a lavish meal, then had a good night's sleep to fully restore his energy. Along the way, he also visited Audrey to carefully memorize every detail of potion brewing. By the time he returned to the villa, night had already fallen. Through the bay window, the half-moon cast its blood-red glow onto the floor. Even after living here for nearly a week, the sight still made him uneasy. As usual, he first cast an expulsion charm, then pulled out the apprentice pathway formula. Sequence 9, Apprentice. Main ingredients. 20 milliliters of Hornassus Grey Mountain Goat Blood. 30 grams of Star Crystal. Supporting ingredients. 100 milliliters purified water. 7 golden mint leaves. 4 drops of poison hemlock. 7 grams of dragon blood grass powder. Edward retrieved a cauldron and carefully added the ingredients in sequence. The liquid inside gradually began to boil, releasing an illusory mist that quickly filled the room, shrouding everything in a hazy fog. A few seconds later, the mist dissipated. Inside the cauldron, only a small lump of pinkish-violet bubbling concoction remained, like a single droplet of water on a lotus leaf, hovering close to the cauldron's walls without truly touching them. Edward carefully poured the droplet into a glass. Through the transparent surface, he saw that the pinkish-violet shimmered faintly, as if countless stars were hidden within, emitting a subtle radiance. So, this is the apprentice potion. Alright, time to give myself a buff first. Edward pulled out a small bottle of Felix Felicis and took a light sip. Instantly, a sense of renewal coursed through his body. Alright, let's do this. Without hesitation, he grabbed the potion and downed it in one gulp. A cool sensation slid down his throat and into his stomach. Before he could even register the taste, his entire body convulsed violently. His vision blurred as everything around him split into overlapping red, yellow, and blue shadows. An indescribable, mystical flood of information surged into his consciousness. His body felt like it had been tossed onto a trampoline and launched upward. Forcing his eyes open, he saw another version of himself lying on the sofa, convulsing. Out-of-body experience. No, soul detachment. All around him, radiant streams of different colors floated, each one brimming with life and unfathomable knowledge. Edward suddenly understood. As long as he reintegrated his consciousness into his body, it would signify a successful potion absorption, his official ascension to an apprentice. Without hesitation, he forced his mind downward, merging with his body. The moment his eyes snapped open. Success. Just then, a crimson moonbeam shone through the window. In an instant, his entire world turned blood-red. A cacophony of endless whispers surged from all directions. Don't save me. 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 The shrill, piercing voices scraped against his mind, sending a torment akin to nails dragging across a blackboard or silver needles stabbing into his fingernails. It was 10 times worse than the pain he had felt when returning to the Harry Potter world. For a split second, his brain felt like it was about to explode. This is, Mr. Doors whispers. Edward let out a pained scream and rolled off the sofa, writhing in agony. His hair and fingernails began to grow at an unnatural speed, leaving bloody scratches on the floor. I'm losing control. Why is this happening? The pain intensified. It felt like his entire body was boiling, on the verge of turning into vapor, ready to be expelled not just through his 7 orifices, but from every pore in his skin. No, I can't let it end like this. There has to be another way. Suddenly, a searing pain flared on the back of his hand. The next second, he found himself standing in a pitch-black night sky. In front of him, a vague, illusory door. A door. Is this the very door that brought me into this world? No time to think. He reached out and pressed his palm against it. In an instant, his mind cleared. The excruciating pain, madness, and despair vanished like a phantom illusion. Tingen City. Klein was immersed in a beautiful dream where he was earning thousands of pounds daily. Suddenly, a layered, echoing prayer rang in his ears. Who the hell is praying to me at this hour? Frustrated, Klein sat up, irritated by whoever had rudely interrupted his dream. But then, he quickly realized. Someone was using the 3-phase format to send a prayer. He listened carefully. It was a male voice, hoarse, seemingly suppressing immense pain. The hanged man, or little son. Without hesitation, he got out of bed, walked 4 steps counterclockwise, and entered the grand, towering palace. A scar-lettered, pulsing star immediately caught his attention. A new person. Sitting at the ancient, weathered bronze table, Klein hesitated briefly before reaching out with his left hand, channeling his spirituality to touch the rippling red star. The scene shifted abruptly. He saw a disheveled, wrecked room. And inside it, a man wailing in agony. Judging by his state, he was clearly losing control. Not only was his hair rapidly growing, but his skin was also turning an eerie, unnatural shade of pale white. Then, the man suddenly went completely still. He rolled over slightly, allowing Klein to see his face more clearly. Wait a second. Isn't this Edward, the guy who came for a divination earlier today? So, he had followed Klein's advice, taken the potion, and promptly lost control. Klein's mind went blank. Shit. Does this mean I'm partially responsible? Note: don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. P.S. We've reached 10 reviews. As promised, you guys will get an extra chapter tomorrow. 1 extra chapter for every 10 reviews. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 18 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 19. The 4th member. Klein awkwardly rubbed his nose before quickly dismissing his ridiculous thoughts. Drinking potions is inherently filled with the unknown and danger. I only divined that he was more suited to be an apprentice. I never said he wouldn't lose control. Besides, even if he wanted to help, he had no experience dealing with this kind of situation. But, is he out of danger now? Or has he completely lost control? Do I need to intervene? Klein hesitated for a long moment before finally reaching out toward the rippling halo in front of him. At the same time, he let his spirituality surge freely, establishing a stable and mysterious connection. Last time, when I connected with Little Sun, my spirituality was already stretched thin, but this time, I still haven't exceeded my limit. Well, lucky you. Edward, having returned to normal, immediately tried pushing the door again. However, it wouldn't budge. In that moment of uncertainty, a realization dawned upon him. His sequence wasn't high enough. If that's the case, how do I get back? Wake up. He tried every possible method he could think of. But nothing worked. Just as panic was about to set in, the darkness suddenly receded. An endless expanse of gray mist replaced it, and Edward found himself lying on an empty, void-like ground. Dazed, he slowly climbed to his feet. The first thing he noticed was the boundless gray-white fog stretching into infinity. In front of him, a massive, ancient, and weathered bronze table. Surrounding it, towering stone pillars reaching toward the heavens. A grand and ancient palace. Could this be? His gaze snapped to the head of the bronze table. There, a mysterious, shadowed figure, enshrouded in thick gray mist, overlooked everything. The fool. I only lost control for a brief moment. Why did Klein bring me to the gray fog? His mind raced, but he quickly came up with a response strategy. I have to act naturally. He took a deep breath and politely inquired. And you are? Klein rested his chin on his hand. His obscured face revealed no emotion as he spoke. You may call me Mr. Fool. Mr. Fool. Klein activated his spirit vision and found that Edward's condition was exactly the same as when he had seen him during the day, perfectly healthy. However, his emotions betrayed his anxiety and nervousness. Mr. Fool, were you the one who saved me from losing control? He had already stabilized before I summoned him up here, but... Klein nodded slightly. You could say that. Might as well take credit for it. Thank you so much, oh great existence. Edward exclaimed. I am willing to offer my flesh and soul as a token of my deepest gratitude. Why does this always happen? Klein's eyelid twitched. First, little son, and now him. I have no interest in the flesh and souls of mortals, he replied in a familiar tone. I prefer fair transactions. You may obtain what you desire from me, but the price must be of equal value. Edward froze. But, I have nothing. No. You have gold pounds. Of course, the great Mr. Fool would never ask for something so mundane. Instead, he spoke calmly. I am particularly interested in secrets hidden throughout history. For example, Russel's diary. Emperor Russell Gustav's diary. Edward's eyes widened in shock. His head lowered even further. As expected of a great existence. Even the notes of Emperor Russell, unreadable to anyone for centuries, must be perfectly comprehensible to you. You must be the embodiment of wisdom, an eternal and unparalleled being whose brilliance eclipses even the sun and moon. Klein coughed awkwardly. Okay, that's enough of that. Flattery means nothing to me. Esteemed Mr. Fool, Edward Said respectfully, I do not have Emperor Russell's diary. However, I have read some ancient books containing knowledge related to mysticism. It was through them that I first stepped into the world of the supernatural. Wait a second. That's not what you said when you came for a divination. Furthermore, through his spirit vision, Klein could clearly sense. Edward was lying. Those books do record quite a few accounts of Emperor Russell's rise to power. Edward paused before continuing, however, there's only one piece of information related to his diary. Over the years, the major churches seem to have been trying to extract clues about the cards of blasphemy he created in his later years. Cards of blasphemy. Mr. Fool straightened slightly, showing a hint of interest. It seems that the emperor created them based on the contents of the blasphemy slate. Each card of blasphemy contains the complete pathway of a sequence. Klein's heart trembled. So, if I could get my hands on the card of the seer pathway, I'd have access to the full set of formulas. But on the surface, he remained calm and composed. What else? Edward rubbed the back of his head awkwardly. I'll need to go back and, do some more research, or rather, make something up. Alright. Mr. Fool's tone remained unhurried. He hesitated internally. Should he allow Edward to join the Tarot Club and participate in the upcoming weekly gatherings? After all, he knew nothing about Edward's character. What if he turned out to be a problem? Then again, now that I think about it, I don't actually know much about the Hanged Man, the Sun, or the Justice either. The Tarot Club was still in its early stages. For now, he could afford to loosen the requirements slightly. If a current member turned out to be a problem, he could always just purge them later. After all, he controlled who could be summoned to the gatherings. With that thought, Klein suddenly felt at ease. I will hold a gathering here every Monday afternoon. By then, there will be others like you attending the meeting. He smiled slightly. I can allow you to join, but you must abide by one rule. You are not to reveal anything about me to anyone, unless I permit it. Edward immediately bowed his head. I will strictly follow your command, Mr. Fool. Before that, you need to choose your codename. Klein gestured toward the bronze table, where a deck of tarot cards had materialized. Choose a card as your alias. The Fool, Justice, the Hanged Man, and the Sun are already taken. Edward stared at the 22 cards, feeling momentarily indecisive. I've never studied tarot before, I have no idea what these cards represent. After thinking for a moment, he shrugged. Forget it. Let fate decide. He flipped over 18 cards face down, shuffled them randomly, closed his eyes, and blindly picked one. Alright, this is it. Klein, watching from across the table, twitched at the corner of his mouth. This guy definitely has decision-making issues. Isn't that supposed to be a problem for the poor? You're clearly rich, aren't you? Edward flipped over the chosen card. The illustration depicted a towering structure, crumbling in an ominous collapse. The Tower. In the tarot deck, the Tower was a highly symbolic card. It was often associated with disaster, destruction, and calamity. A famously ominous card. Klein silently hoped that allowing him to join the tarot club wouldn't turn out to be a mistake. Maintaining his mystical air, Klein spoke in a solemn tone. Remember your choice. It will follow you for the rest of your life. At the same time, he raised his hand and severed the connection. The crimson light quickly retracted. Across from him, Edward's figure dissolved into a hazy shadow, vanishing bit by bit. Back in Backland. As the crimson glow faded, Edward returned to the villa. A slight burning sensation spread across the back of his right hand. Moments later, the scarlet light spiraled inward, forming a strange sigil before completely disappearing into his skin. Edward let out a long sigh. I had planned to join the tarot club eventually, but I was supposed to do it after preparing a proper backstory. Now, thanks to that sudden loss of control, I ended up joining completely unprepared. He sighed again. The Harry Potter storyline already collapsed before it even began. Let's hope the Lord of the Mysteries plot doesn't derail the same way. Note: don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Enjoying the story so far? Be sure to add it to your library to stay updated with the latest chapters. IseeBLACK creators' thoughts. 7 comments 0 vote. Chapter 20. Sequence 9. Above the gray fog, Klein watched as the yellow crystal pendulum rotated counterclockwise and was unsurprised by the result. So, he was lying after all. But with this kind of divination method, as long as there was even a single hidden truth among everything he said, it would produce the same outcome. After some thought, he wrote on the manifested parchment. Edward's inclusion in the tarot club is harmful to me. He silently repeated the sentence 7 times before observing the reaction of the pendulum. The crystal slowly began to rotate counterclockwise. So, it's not harmful, in fact, it might even be beneficial. Leaning back against the bronze chair, Klein let a slight smile appear on his face. That's good enough for now. Backland. Edward sat slumped on the sofa, gazing at the crimson moonlight filtering through the window. His mind was filled with doubt. I'm not from the Abraham family, tonight isn't even a crimson full moon, so why was I able to hear the murmurs of Mr. Door and nearly lose control? Does the Lord of the Mysteries world completely disregard logic? And when the next full moon arrives, will I hear those whispers again? What was that door in the night sky that saved me from losing control? He shook his head vigorously, trying to dispel these thoughts. So, I'm officially a Sequence 9 apprentice now. That extra energy inside me is that spirituality. In the original novel, Old Neil once explained, all living beings have spirituality and possess a spirit body. But ever since Edward arrived in this world, he had never been able to sense his own spirituality. Perhaps it was because he didn't originally belong here. Kind of like how chakra is exclusive to Naruto's world. Edward carefully focused on the new energy inside him. It feels almost identical to magic. No, wait, spirituality comes from the remnants of Beyonder creatures in potions, while magic doesn't. From a hierarchy standpoint, spirituality should be superior to magic. In the Harry Potter world, a wizard's magical power stemmed from the awakening of their bloodline and grew gradually with age. For most wizards, their magic would only awaken 3 times in their lifetime. The first awakening occurred in childhood, marking their transformation from an ordinary person to a wizard. The second awakening happened around age 11, aligning with their entry into Hogwarts. The third and final awakening took place in adulthood, resulting in a significant surge in magical power. Edward was either extremely talented or exceptionally lucky, as he had already experienced 3 awakenings despite not yet reaching adulthood. His magic was far stronger than that of many fully grown wizards. But due to the hierarchical gap between worlds, Beyonders from the Lord of the Mysteries world had high resistance to magic. This left Edward feeling extremely unsafe, which was why he had hurriedly consumed the potion to become a Beander. Next, I need to research how to properly act as an apprentice and then quickly, wait a minute. A sudden realization struck him. This feeling, have I already completely digested the apprentice potion? How is that even possible? After a brief moment of shock, a thought surfaced in his mind. Wait, isn't there something called preemptive acting? Apprentice, oh. Edward had spent 3 years at Hogwarts, and for nearly 2 of them, he had essentially been playing the role of a magical apprentice. If that doesn't count as acting, I don't know what does. But then a new question arose. That all happened before I consumed the potion. Does it still count? Regardless, this was good news. Edward didn't dwell on it too much and instead focused on sensing the changes that came with becoming an apprentice. A segment of knowledge from the potion surfaced in his mind. As a Sequence 9 apprentice, he had gained not 1, but 2 extraordinary abilities, traits. 1. Door opening, the innate ability of an apprentice, allowing him to utilize the spirit world to pass through walls and doors. 2. Dullness, in your dullness, divinity will not awaken. You will not be contaminated. You will not lose control due to corruption. Edward frowned. What the hell is this, dullness? This passive-sounding buff might have been useless in other settings. But in the Lord of the Mysteries world, it was absolutely overpowered. This means I can directly face high sequence beyonders, gods, and even outer deities without being corrupted. Wait, outer deities. Did my erased memories just come back? A sudden cool sensation flooded his brain. His previously deleted memories about outer gods, pillars, Amen, and Jesus wannabe resurfaced. All the uncertainties and doubts he had felt due to those memory gaps were instantly resolved. Damn, did this ability deliberately restore my erased memories just to prove itself? It took Edward a long time to fully digest this newfound knowledge. Then, an even bigger question emerged. Where the hell did this cheat-like dullness ability come from? Was it a blessing from a god? Impossible. Even gods couldn't do this. Was it a benefit from transmigrating? Maybe. But the most likely explanation was that it had something to do with that door in the sky. This better not be some sinister scheme. If it is, everyone might as well drop the book now. Edward exhaled deeply. An apprentice with dullness, is it even the same apprentice anymore? I'll take things one step at a time. First, I need to meet with Audrey and make sure our stories match, otherwise, I might slip up later. Empress Burrow, inside the luxurious Hall family estate. What? You almost lost control when drinking the potion. What? In that critical moment, you encountered a mysterious being called Mr. Fool. What? You also joined the Tarot Club. Audrey was hit with 3 consecutive shocks. She stared at Edward with wide, emerald green eyes. We only parted ways less than a day ago, and you've already gone through all of that. Edward shrugged nonchalantly. Pretty much. Audrey hesitated, debating whether she should reveal that she was also a member of the Tarot Club. Before she could decide, Edward suddenly spoke first. Wait, you just said, also joined. What do you mean by, also? A stunned silence fell over Audrey. A few minutes later, she finished recounting her experience of joining the Tarot Club. Edward immediately extended his hand with a smile. That means we're colleagues from now on. She absent-mindedly gave him a half-hearted handshake before shifting into a more serious tone. Now that you've become a Beander, there are some fundamental but incredibly important pieces of knowledge you must understand. She grabbed a brush and quickly scrawled 2 words, digestion, and acting, onto her drawing board, taking on the authoritative air of a teacher. For a moment, Edward felt as if he had stepped into a classroom titled Miss Justice's Lecture on Beyonders 101. Cute. The key to potions is not mastery, but digestion. Not exploitation, but acting. And potion names are not merely symbolic representations of their essence, they serve as tangible imagery and, more importantly, act as the key to digestion. Each potion is brewed using different extraordinary materials, and those materials inherently carry the spiritual remnants of their respective creatures. Think of these remnants as a fortress. If you want to infiltrate, conquer, and dismantle it, you must find a weak point, a key. Potion names provide hints in this regard. By acting in accordance with the name, you harmonize your body, mind, and spirit, disguising yourself as an insider, tricking the guards, and strolling in without resistance. So, from this moment on, you need to establish the guiding principles for acting as an apprentice. This will gradually lead to the complete digestion of your potion. But there's one crucial thing you must remember, you are only acting. Audrey adjusted the non-existent glasses on her nose. Edward, sitting on a small stool, raised his hand. Professor Audrey, my apprentice potion is already digested. Huh. She was dumbfounded. The textbook never mentioned a situation like this. Maybe it's because I've spent the past few years playing the role of a magic apprentice. Audrey suddenly understood. So, you preemptively completed the acting process. She pulled out a small notebook. I should jot this down. Audrey, there's something else about my sequence that I need to tell you. Edward saw no reason to hide the existence of dullness from her. When I became an apprentice, some kind of anomaly occurred, something I don't fully understand. Besides gaining the extraordinary ability door opening, I also received an additional Beyander trait called dullness. I cannot be corrupted, nor will I lose control due to corruption. Audrey turned to look at him, her expression blank with disbelief. I'm sorry, did I hear you correctly? Could you repeat that? He repeated himself. You're sure? Her gaze sharpened. I mean, you're absolutely certain this dullness is real and not some deception from an evil god. Now that you put it that way, I am starting to feel a little unsure. They exchanged bewildered glances. Then, Audrey's eyes suddenly brightened. Tomorrow is the tarot meeting. You can ask Mr. Fool to verify it for you. Well, Edward hesitated. Mr. Fool probably can't answer this question. Oh, right. Audrey walked over to her wardrobe and pulled open the doors. Look at my latest project. She pushed aside her hanging clothes, revealing a space inside as large as the room itself. When did you learn the extension charm? I just wanted to give it a try, and, well, it worked on my first attempt. She tilted her chin up slightly, waiting for praise. Your talent for magic might rival Professor Dumbledore's. Hee. Unfortunately, I still can't figure out the trick to transfiguration. She pointed her wand at a pen on the desk. The pen twisted and morphed into a knife, but within seconds, it reverted to its original form. Right now, I can barely manage transformations between inanimate objects. As for changing between living and non-living things, I'm completely stuck. Magic in the Harry Potter world functioned like an I believe therefore it is system. Logic didn't matter, only conviction did. Well, magic is mysterious like that. Edward glanced at the clock on the wall, then stood up. It's getting late. I should head back. Audrey lifted the hem of her dress slightly and curtsied. Good night, Edward. The next day, Tingen City, Divination Club. As Klein sipped his Potter Highland coffee, he watched the last client of the morning leave. Stretching, he muttered, time to go back and prepare for the afternoon's tarot meeting. He donned his coat, placed a half-silk top hat on his head, grabbed his cane, and was just about to step out when he saw Angelica rushing over. Mr. Moretti, Miss Christina. Before she could finish, Christina pushed past her and entered the divination room, her face filled with anxiety. Mr. Moretti, my niece, Megos, she's missing. Somewhere else. In a dimly lit room, a quill pen scribbled rapidly across a notebook. The child inside Megos's womb is approaching maturity, nearing a critical moment. Soon, she will receive an inexplicable summons, leading her toward Blackthorn Security Company. Several lines were crossed out. But just at that moment, the unborn child within her suddenly received a command, one that compelled Megos to leave Tingen City. Ins Zangwil attempted to alter her thoughts, but how could a mere grade 0 sealed artifact possibly distort the will of a god? Megos has vanished. Ins Zangwil's plan has collapsed, and as a result, he will have to pay. A pale hand suddenly gripped the quill, crossing out the words, he will have to pay. Then, tightening its grasp, it continued writing. Megos's body, weakened by the excessive energy consumption of the unborn child, succumbed to exhaustion. She collapsed by the roadside. This is reasonable. A kind-hearted passerby, recognizing her identity, decided to take her back to Tingen. But this is far from over.